This webinar. It's called 60 Non-Traditional Jobs You Can Do with a Law Degree and Should Strongly Consider Doing. I'm going to talk about this topic today, and I'll talk about most of the non-traditional topics. But before I started that, there was a few things that I wanted to talk about related to this topic. And I think this is a very important topic because a lot of people leave the practice of law and do other things for the wrong reasons. And a lot of times people stick with the practice of law also for the wrong reasons. And that's what I'm concerned about. I would like to talk a little bit about today, because I've seen countless people make very bad mistakes, both leaving the practice of law and also staying with the practice of law, and they probably shouldn't have. As a preliminary matter, one of the things I wanted to say is that whatever you do for a job, regardless of what it is, regardless of so I know one guy that was an attorney, and I think he was at White and Case, or no, he was at Cadwalader and opened a bike shop and loved it. I know other people that have done lots of different jobs. Whatever it is that you do should energize you, meaning you think about the work and it gets you excited. You put more of yourself into it because the work is fun and it's something that you really enjoy and really like to do. And I can tell you for myself personally, every day I start the day very early. I can't wait to get to work. I'm almost mad that I have to go to sleep to start my job each day. And I'm not alone. Anybody that's doing what they like feels that way about their job. And I do it because I love it. I can't believe that I have the job I have. And it's like that for anybody that's in the right job. Anybody that's in the right job feels that way about their job. One thing that I believe, and you may not even know this about yourself right now, but I believe that God or whoever or whatever the force is that controls the universe gives everybody out there something they're supposed to be good at. And it could be all different things. And you just never know what it could be. I had an instance recently. It's a funny story, but it's actually not a funny story, but it's an interesting story. This woman that I know very well went to Harvard and graduated from Harvard and just for college, and then taught what she did. She sold real estate, I think, in Paris and some other stuff, and never really found anything that she liked. And now she's in her 40s, and her mom said to her not too long ago, 6 months ago, I remember when you were a kid, you used to really like playing with soaps and all this. Oh yeah, I really like playing with soaps. And so this person, after a career of not doing anything particularly enjoyed, is now started a soap business that's actually doing fairly well. And it's just interesting that sometimes there's things that you may have done when you were young, or things that you may be learn about yourself as time goes on, that you figure out that appeal to you naturally. And those are the kind of jobs you should be doing, things that appeal to you naturally. Work should empower you, is what I'm saying. And it can. And a law firm or wherever you're working now in your legal career doesn't necessarily mean that you're in the wrong career. So that's kind of one of the things I wanted to talk about today, and what I am going to talk about. But before I start, I wanted to tell you just a quick story. It's not the greatest story in the world, but it's a story from when I was young. I don't know what the age was, but maybe I was in second grade or something. I started getting very good at soccer, and so good that by the time I was in third or fourth grade, I was on these like state teams where I was traveling around and playing with kids that were much older than me. And when I was young and playing soccer in my neighborhood and stuff, I really enjoyed it. It was fun. I liked the attention of scoring goals, and I felt like I was free. It was something I looked forward to. And then when I got into this more serious soccer, I was suddenly no longer like the forward. They put me at, midfield instead of forward. And I was playing with these kids that were much older. It was very competitive. Like, kids were getting cut from the team. It wasn't fun. The parents were mad. There were long practices. It was just a horrible experience, and so horrible that by the time I was like in sixth grade or seventh grade, I was done with soccer. I was just completely done, and wanted nothing to do with it. And my father was very like being involved because I was very good, but when I was in these really competitive environments, I just hated it. It was just like not for me. It wasn't fun anymore. It was something else. And a lot of people have that experience when they're young with athletics. And so I played again. Maybe I went out for the team when I was a freshman and played varsity soccer for 1 year, but I was just so done with it. I just didn't want the stress of it anymore. And I just felt completely burned by that experience. That experience, by the way, is probably not much different than what a lot of people have practicing law. if you decide you want to start your career at the hardest possible firm or the worst possible firm for you, the most demanding possible firm because you're going to make the most money, that's no different than deciding if to go out for a very competitive team that may not be fun. If you play high school football, or if you're playing and then all of a sudden are thrown into the professional league and you're not ready for it, it's not going to be fun for you. You're going to get banged around. You're not going to get any positive feedback and you're not going to like it. And I think it's like that for a lot of people with practicing law. So I had an interesting experience at a dinner I was at on last Wednesday, which I think was the day after this webinar. And I was sitting next to a guy that was head of Bain for North America. So meaning, I guess, California, not California, but the whole United States and all of South America. And I was like, anytime I'm sitting next to someone, and I didn't really know who he was before the dinner, but anytime I'm sitting next to someone like that, I always like to say he'd been working there for 35 years. And I said to him, what is the most important thing that you've learned? Because he's risen to the top of this organization, which is a huge, I don't know how many thousands of employees they have, but it's a massive company that does consulting. And I said, what is the most important thing that you've learned in your time in this position? And what is the one lesson? Like if somebody were to talk to you right before you retired, what would you, and he was older, but I mean, what would you tell them was the most important lesson, or what did you learn? And he said something that was very interesting, and it's very interesting. And I think it will, to some extent, probably resonate with you. And this is something, I don't think it was in any report. It was just something that he came up with on the fly. And he said that there's three things that are important to people that are working anywhere. And this is, I wasn't asking for employment advice. I was just saying, what have you learned? He says, there's three things that are important to anybody that's working anywhere. And he said, the first thing is that somebody cares about you, meaning that the company cares about you and somebody cares about you. And I thought that was very interesting because I was always going to like Costco and looking at the employees and how enthusiastic they are. And they seem to have very good health insurance and other things there. And so I thought that was, but you said somebody cares about you, meaning that your manager cares about you, that the people you're working with cares about you, that you really believe that the organization cares about you. And he said, that's one of the most important things. That's a very, very important thing. And I'll come back to that and talk about that. But think about that. Like, do you really feel like your employer, people in your employer care about you, or would they just replace you? And I remember the first firm I worked at, I really felt like the people cared about me. And the next one I went, I didn't. And I felt like I was just a commodity. But do you really feel like the people that you're working with care about you? And that's a big deal. That's what people go to work for. They work harder when people care about them, and they feel better about their jobs when people care about them. And they don't want to be just a commodity. They want to feel like there's some sort of relationship and that the employer and people inside the employer care about them. So he said the first thing is that someone needs to care about you, and the company cares about you too, or the firm. And I think that's very significant. And I looked around at my company, and I've got a lot of people, probably 3/4 of the people working here worked for me for 15 to 20 years or more. They start and they stay, but they're people that I care about. And then the people that work for them are people that care about them. They care about them. And so it's very interesting, like people caring about you. That's, and very few law firms are able to make people feel that way. And some of them do, but most of them, they may start out that way, but then they become more and more corporate, and they're trying to make the highest profits partner and a bunch of different things. Whereas a lot of times smaller law firms may keep that family environment. And if you don't have that, that's huge. Like that, if you don't have that, if you don't feel like your employer cares about you, wow, that doesn't make you very happy. And that makes you the wrong type of employee, right? You're not that. So the first thing is you want people to care about you. So the next thing that's important is that you're always learning. Are you just doing, if you're doing litigation, are you just doing document review all day? Are you doing anything where you're learning? And that's one of the things I loved about practicing law, was that you were just constantly like reading new things and learning and becoming smarter and becoming more of a kind of a encyclopedia of knowledge and making connections between things. So are you always learning? And a lot of people feel like they get into positions where they're not learning. And if you're not learning, and that's important, and it's important to a lot of people, then that's not good either. that's not something that where you're going to succeed if you're not learning. So are you learning? And does the employer where you're at care about you learning? Are you around people that are teaching you things, so like smart people or people that have things to teach you? Are they teaching you things in a way that's important to you? And so that I think a lot about that, just because you need to understand that if you're not learning, then you're just nothing's happening. So I love the idea of learning. And that's one of the things I like about big firms is I think they do offer a very good opportunity to learn, to become a much better attorney and to all these sorts of things. And so you can learn. And then the final one that they talked about that he said was that you're also doing work that you believe is important. So a lot of times attorneys will go into firms and they will think, I'm just doing something for, it's not important for this client. There's nothing important about doing this due diligence work. There's nothing important about this. And so you need to be able to talk yourself into believing what you do is important. And you need to think that the work you're doing is important. If you don't feel like it's important and there's something to it, then that's also a problem. So those three things, believing that someone cares about you, always learning, and doing work that you believe is important. And that those are all things that I think that you should really think about if you're thinking about leaving the practice of law and doing something non-traditional thing, because odds are, in my opinion, the odds are that you're probably just in the wrong environment. If you're in a smaller firm, I've talked about this many times, a lot of times people have very impersonal experiences in big firms and big cities, because big firms and big cities a lot of times are like corporations and they feel like no one cares about them or they don't have any connection, and because of that they leave, and or they leave the practice of law. They think they need to do something else when all it would take is finding people to be with you that care about you. I remember it was interesting, like I went to high school for part of my high school in Thailand. And one day there was this stray dog from the street that was coming around this apartment complex that I lived in, and really was being nice to me, and came up and wanted to be fed, and I took him up into this apartment and fed him, but then they said you can't keep him here. I don't know what happened, but the sad thing is he was just going up to everyone, trying to make everyone be his friend and be cared about, and eventually he was pushed out on the street and wasn't able to find anyone. And it was just, and then I remember seeing him like 3 months later, and I walked up to him and he growled and was just like a street mean, angry dog. And that's sad. So but people are like that too. There's a thing called failure to thrive with children when they're born, where if they don't get hugged and when they're babies and enough, they die. And are you with people that care about you? And so many times, what's the point of putting yourself into some environments if it's just cold and impersonal and there's no one there that cares about you? That's not good. And what's the point of going someplace where you're just making money, but you're not learning anything, or you're not doing work that's important? It's interesting too, because I think a lot of this, and I'll talk about a few other things and then I'll move into these careers, but I think a lot of this has to do with the fact that people are programmed to believe that they need to do certain types of things. And one of the nice things about some law, like Yale Law School in particular, is people that come out of there often are more focused on doing work that they believe is important than doing other types of work. So work that they believe is important would be working for the State Department or working for some government office. And they feel that there's some sort of higher calling to that type of work as opposed to a law firm. Now, is that true? No, I don't think that's always true, but they believe that. And then they work with people often. They have satisfying careers because people care about them many times because they went to Yale Law School and because they are so smart. I don't know, but I think that people are very enthusiastic, law firms, about hiring people from that school in some areas of the country. And then another thing, of course, is they want to be learning. So they love learning and they go to different places where they can do that. In contrast, a lot of people don't do that. It's the exact opposite. They don't put themselves in environments where people care about them. They don't care about learning. They're more concerned about money and the work that they don't really care one way or another whether it's important. And that's sad. So those three things I believe that you need to have in your career are important. There's also a couple other things that I just want to talk to you about briefly with those, and then I'll move on. But many times if you're in the wrong firm, you may just be in some place where people don't care about you and you haven't connected with them. If you're in the wrong firm, you just may be in a place where you're working on matters where you're not learning and you want to be learning. And if you're in the wrong firm, you may just, the work is not important to you and it's not what you need. So it's not necessarily that you need to quit the practice of law. It's often, and do a non-traditional career. It's often that you're just those three needs, I think, being met. And it's very important to understand that, because a lot of times people, just by switching firms or switching legal environments or switching markets, are likely to be happy when they wouldn't. I have interesting experiences all the time, but I had an interesting experience not too long ago where I was talking to this woman that had been, I don't know, at a big firm, and I don't know, you pick a big city, Chicago, New York or something, and pretty happy there. I mean, doing okay, but got a job in a small town with a very good firm in South Carolina or something like that. And the people in the firm had gone all from the town. They'd all gone to the same high school and all gone to, and then come back to this town after, and all knew each other and socialized. And because she was a single woman and not from this group, and I don't know why they hired her. She did some kind of practice area that they needed her for, like some type of corporate or something probably. And she felt excluded, and she felt no one cared about her or liked her. So they were very pleasant to her, but she felt excluded. So even though the work was very interesting and she was learning and she was having a very good career otherwise, and the money was fine, and then the work was the type of work she wanted to do and that she believed was important, just because people didn't care about her, she wasn't happy. So that's a huge difference. So I had another candidate not too long ago that was at some giant firm making $350,000 or more per year. And he was working, it was I don't even want to say the matter, but it was this auto liability type case. And the client didn't care. They wanted him to do some daily update of class filings or something, even though he was a very senior associate, and he didn't believe that was important. And that's why he wanted to leave. So people leave firms a lot of times for those three reasons. They don't believe the work is important. They're not learning. No one cares about them. So imagine how your career and where you're at right now would be different. And you wouldn't need to think about these alternative careers if those three needs were being met. And often it's just being in the right firm and with the right people. And then the final story is just, a lot of times people tend to do much better and have much longer careers in small to medium-sized firms, or even smallish firms. And I think that's because they're with people often that care about them, and it's less business-like. That's not to say that there's anything wrong with big firms. I think big firms are awesome. But at the same time, if you're not finding people that care about you, that's not good. There's a study that kind of talks about when someone's unhappy, and there's typically often three reasons that the people are unhappy. And it's related to this, but I also want to make sure you understand these kind of three reasons why you may be unhappy thinking about non-traditional careers. And the first reason is, a lot of times you have these three things in there, and the first one is psychological, and that can make people unhappy. So I had an interesting experience. I joined this firm. The second firm I worked at was this firm called Dewey Ballantyne. That's no longer in existence. But when I was a new associate there, they would always bring out with a first year associate class, and they would have all of the new associates spend like a week together, and they would have these events. This is in the middle of this is like in the fall, or for maybe in the winter, and they had a kind of formal dance. I don't remember, but they'd spend a week together, and they would take a picture, and they had, I don't know, but or take a picture of a group. They would just do things for the week. But I remember meeting all these people at the firm, and they were all like saying things like, oh, I'm just here for a year or two, then I'm going to do another job, another career. And I was thinking to myself, like, and they were all saying this, and I was like, this is absolutely insane. I was joining these firms with the idea of only being there 1 or 2 years. And I noticed when I was in law school, even, like, there's people start getting these bad ideas about law firms, even before they'd even stepped foot in a law firm, what it's like to work in a law firm, and the reason that law firms are bad, and all this sort of stuff. And these are kind of psychological reasons for not necessarily liking where you're working. And I think that people form psychological preconceptions about working in a law firm is bad and you need to go in-house. You need to do something else, or you need to quit. And these psychological things are often backed up without proof. They're just, people just have these ideas that they settle on because of a groupthink or whatever that they're getting from other people. And you need to be very careful of not allowing your brain to trick you with these psychological tricks into thinking that you need to do something else because everyone around you is saying the same thing. and making you think that practicing law is bad. You obviously went to law school for a reason, and you're in law school or you graduated and you want to be an attorney for a reason. So you have to be very careful about people trying to influence you psychologically with how bad things are. When I was in a law firm, people would always stop by my office and want to talk every day about how bad the law firm was, and in whatever law firm, it didn't matter. And I'm sure it's like that with you. Everybody, this is just how it is. So psychological stuff, and just to remember that you don't want to be influenced by these things. Other thing is too is, and I'll just bring this up as a psychological type of thing, it can be very tiring working long hours inside of a law firm. It can be very tiring and it can grind on you psychologically. Going to law school, it's been proven that it makes people, that just the whole idea of law school and the thought patterns you picked up makes people depressed or on edge. And so you have to be very careful if you're thinking about doing something else. Is it psychologically motivated? And is there truth in that psychology? And I recommend, if you think that there's any truth to that, that you talk to people outside of the practice of law, whether it's a therapist or a coach or people, and really get some insight into that, because often it isn't. Now, the next reason, that the other thing, there's three of them. The first one is psychological. The next one is biological. So the biological thing is very interesting. By biological, a lot about that working in a law firm, there's a lot that I could talk about with biology, but biology just means that, is this something that you may be cut out for just from the way you think, from the way your mind works, from what you are. I'll give you, and I don't like giving these examples, but I'm going to, because I think it's important that you really understand why you may be seeking to leave the practice of law and do one of these alternative careers. And biology means a lot of things. It's interesting. There's a book by Malcolm Gladwell, where he talks about admission into very prestigious schools and colleges. And he talks about the fact that schools like Harvard and will believe that, and Yale, I'm sure, believe that regardless of who they admit, a certain percentage of those people are going to be in the bottom of their class. So traditionally, what they would do is they would admit people that were, and again, this is not being prejudiced or anything, but they would admit athletes. And the athletes, a lot of times, they would compensate, they would get admitted, but they would probably not have the same, because they were practicing sports all the time, and not always have the same grades and things. And whether it was hockey or whatever, the baseball, whatever the sport, they would admit a lot of their athletes, assuming they'd be in the bottom of their class. And not all of them, obviously, but a lot of them. And what's interesting about that is, if you go to a school like that and say you want to go to, and you're admitted as an athlete and you want to be a doctor or something, and so you take all these pre-med classes, it's probably going to be pretty hard for you to compete against those people and really in classes where there are curves and things, and do well. You'll probably end up doing another type of major altogether. And that's exactly what happens to a lot of people in that situation. So by bio, many times, if you're in an environment, does it make sense to try to get ahead in a firm where everyone, frankly, might be more smarter than you or more talented? Or does it make sense to compete in a practice area where you don't have natural ability? So if I tried to do corporate law, I'm telling you, man, I would not do well. Like, I like to write and that sort of thing, but if I was in corporate law, I would say that most people that were doing corporate law would have a lot more aptitude than me, and I would get blown out of the water. It's not because I'm dumb. It's just I'm not made up for it. I'm just biologically, it's whatever the way my brain works, it's not my strength. Same things happen to me when I've tried to go to business school. I don't think that way. I don't like it. And so you may be in a type of firm or in a practice area or something where it just doesn't match with your biology and your natural skill set. Or you may be with people that are much, and I'm not criticizing that. I had an instance when I was at, and it's not a nice thing to say, but when I was at this law firm, and they had hired a child had gone to fourth tier law school, was barely accredited, as a favor to a client, and that particular attorney wasn't that smart, and he couldn't do the work, and so they had to spend a lot. And that's nothing wrong with him. It's just that the work that they were giving him was very, I don't know, and so you have to think about this stuff. So if it's not to say that there's something wrong with you, but if you're trying to compete against people that are doing much better than at a different level, you're not going to be happy. Just if you're trying to play, if you're a really good high school basketball player and you try to go in the professionals, you're not going to be happy and you're going to get blown out of the water. Their biology is different than yours. If they're 7 feet tall or whatever, it's not going to work. So there's bio, and then the next thing is social, and that's the third thing. So remember, psycho, bio, and then social. And then what social means is social essentially means that you may not be a fit for that group socially. And so if you're not a fit for current law firm you're in socially, that could be a real problem, meaning different types of people get along with different types of people. And what that means is that you may be comfortable in one type of environment and not another. I look at law firm websites all day, and it's very funny. Sometimes I see law firm websites where everybody looks like a model from Abercrombie and Finch. Then the next one, I see everybody with bottle glasses. And then the next one I see they're all different groups of people like to socialize together, and they come together. So sometimes you just might be in the wrong group. So, and I apologize for spending so much time on this, and I'm going to move on to the meat of the presentation. But my point to you is that looking at a non-traditional job, not practicing law, is often very dangerous because you're not thinking in the right way. You're thinking that you don't want to practice law when really what you should be thinking about is, am I in an environment where someone cares about me? Am I learning constantly? And am I doing work that I believe is important? Because if you don't have those three things, then it's not the fact that you need to leave the practice of law, it's that you need to fix those. And I just want to make sure everybody get in an environment where people care about you, get in an environment where you're learning, get in an environment where you're doing work you believe is important, and then everything's fine. It's that simple. And then the other 3 points, these are Harrison's points as I go by them, is that if you're in a social environment where the people don't like you, you can't, who cares? Or you don't get along with them, you need to find one where they do. And then if you're in an environment that's too competitive for you, or vice versa, not competitive enough, which happens a lot, then you need to move up to a more competitive one. Then that's a bio type issue. And then the final one is psychological. Don't allow other people's psychologies to freak you out. That's just not good. Before you do any of this, and here goes the presentation, I just really want to urge you to think about these things. Now, the good news is I've met a lot of people that have chosen non-traditional legal careers. And as a matter of fact, when I went to law school, my grandma said, my father went to law school and his father went to law school, and both, one of them was a banker and the other was this, and you don't have to be a lawyer. And I didn't even know really what a lawyer did at that point, but people can have great careers, and lawyers, by the way, do awesome in other careers. I have seen so many success stories about people leaving the practice of law. It blows my mind. I meet them all the time. They're all over, and many people can have much better careers doing other things than practicing law, and whether it's in a law firm or in-house. And I think a lot of people that are in the right environments for them, if they are very happy practicing law, there's certain people that love it. I know people that get up at 4 a.m. because they love practicing law. They're so excited. And if you're in the case, then that's great. But a lot of people that leave are able to do very well. And what you'll discover if you're currently practicing, and it's fun, is when you get out into the world as an attorney, because of all your preparation and going to school and all the things that you learn to do well, and that the study that you put into it, the way you're thinking, is that you'll realize that you really have a leg up, meaning you have a lot of smarts compared to people out there, and you're able to really see opportunities and do well. I can't believe how well people do. And a lot of the most successful people in business and in different professions are attorneys. And the big idea is that, that most of the jobs that I'll talk about today, and there's more than 60, I think we've updated, this is based on an article that's on Law Crossing, I think, but most of these 60, there's hundreds of things you can do, and I'll kind of talk about them in a minute. But one of the things I want to stress to you, though, is that as you consider doing an alternative legal career, if that's in fact what you want to do, after my kind of introduction, as you consider doing an alternative career, you should go and really work towards ideas and things that interest you. So what is it you spend your free time doing? What is it that interests you? What do you read about when you have time? When Amazon first came out, I ordered books about paving, because I was interested in asphalt and paving, and literally because I loved it. But what is it you do in your free time? What do you think about? What do you dream about? Some people, for example, I know one guy that loves to drink, and there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe the level, and so he's interested in wineries, and you can do all sorts of things, and you don't need the bar exam. And there's often way too many attorneys out there that are just, they're not on the right profession. It doesn't match what they're interested in. If you're not excited about what you're doing, there's something wrong. I'm just telling you. You mean you're either in the wrong environment, which means the wrong practice setting, or if you can't conceive of any of this working, then you're doing something that's completely wrong. It's just, you may be too entrepreneurial. You may be have too much of a sales, I don't know, but you may be in the wrong profession. And if you are, that's a problem. And there's a lot of competition for attorneys. Law schools are pumping out, I don't know what the number is, 30,000 new ones per year, and everyone's trying to get ahead, and everybody's willing to work hard. And so if you don't have the drive and motivation to do this, then someone else is going to be able to do it. And someone else is going to be smarter than you. Someone else is going to have better social skills than you. Someone else is going to be able to bring them. And you have to be all in to do well at most things. That's not to say there's anything wrong with not being all in, and you can still have a career, but at the same time, there's a lot of competition. And I believe for most attorneys, it makes sense to often do an alternative career if you're not happy and not interested and it's not empowering you. You should feel healthier working than not working. And if you don't feel that way, that's a problem. Work should be fun. My grandfather, for example, did something similar to what I do. He studied foreign affairs, and he would give speeches every week and talks, and people and did it until his mid-90s. So and would get up at 3 a.m. to listen to the news, and it's just on a shortwave radio. I mean, you have to like it. And I just want you to understand that after all the things I've said, here's some of the reasons that you may really want to consider another career. And I think the practice of law is awesome, but at the same time, it's not for everyone. And if it's not for you, you're going to find out, and I'm going to give you some ideas about this very, very quickly. The competition for being an attorney and for everything is beyond severe. And for most people, getting to the top is unlikely. Now, it's not because you're not going to get to the top because you're not talented enough. You're not going to get to the top because you don't like it enough. So I wanted to talk to you also, in talking about this point, I want to talk to you about a very important point. And I want to remind you of a couple things. There's a real problem, and it's always been a problem in any profession, whether it's practicing law or there's a real problem. And the problem is too many people think like employees. And what an employee does is, an employee means, and just think about how that they work the minimum amount they need to, they don't come up with new ideas, and then other people think like an owner is someone that looks out for things, gets there early, is anticipating things, and I could talk forever about the difference between someone that just thinks they work somewhere and someone that takes an ownership and pride in their job, and they're constantly learning new things and taking new courses and advancing themselves and doing whatever they can. If you were a boss, who would you advance? Would you advance the person that's just putting in and doing the minimum necessary? Or would you advance the person that's freaking all in and totally fired up about whatever they're doing? And that's why most people don't get ahead. Anybody can be a partner anywhere, but you need to be the person that's most dedicated. And if you're the most dedicated, clients are going to pick up on it. But most people aren't dedicated. They're just brainwashed. They don't want to be that way. I don't know why, but maybe it's because they're in the wrong profession and don't like it. Or maybe they're being influenced by others psychologically, that such a place is a bad place to work and no one should be happy. It's just dumb. None of this hurts you. But most attorneys start out very excited. And when they realize how much competition there is, and they get influenced by people around them, it's very difficult. A lot of them give up. And you're going to have a difficult time, no matter how smart you are, is if you're not the most interested in what you're doing, or the most enthusiastic, even getting a job with a large corporation. There's plenty of people that can do the work, but who's enthusiastic? And again, there's people just constantly coming out of law school, and in law firms, you need to bring in business, you need to be often in the right place at the right time, and you need to be able to work a lot of hours. And again, I want to come back to this point, especially if you're trying to succeed in a large law firm. You have to love what you're doing. No one can possibly work these kind of hours if it's not fun. Like, you have to really enjoy it. And a lot of people don't. And if anybody, by the way, is telling you, oh, you shouldn't be doing, what's wrong with you? Why are you here? Those people are your enemy, and you need to be very careful. If you really like what you're doing, you should throw yourself into it and be enthusiastic, because what happens when you like something is, when you like something, you're putting everything you got into it. And it's interesting and it's fun, and you're seeing things that other people don't see. And it's just very easy for you. And if you don't like something, it's almost impossible. Like for example, never liked chemistry. I thought it was horrible. I couldn't for the life of me, but other people look at chemistry and it just makes perfect sense to them. I couldn't understand. I thought constitutional law was interesting, but I just thought it was just slow theories over. Whereas I would sit in tax law and I would understand what someone was going to say. I would understand where he would start the conclusion, and I would understand where he was going to get to in 10 minutes talking about it. And that doesn't mean I'm super smart. It just means that's something that I liked. So again, you have to like what you're doing, and if you don't like practicing law, that's a problem. And if it's for the wrong reasons, and if you're very motivated and you have a lot of motivation and you want to make money, or you want to be famous, or you want to do something, then you're often going to be better off putting your efforts elsewhere. And really think about it. If you're just average wherever you are, and you've always been average, even if you can, and you have no desire to be exceptional, like, why not take that effort and put it into something you like? It could be making soap. It could be a million things. Who knows? But you need to do something that you like, because you're going to do better, and you're going to get more rewards with less effort. I've been in situations where someone asked me about something, and if someone asked me, how do I find a good attorney for a problem? I could sit down and talk for 10 hours. But if someone asked me, how do I clean rust off my car? That would not be a topic that would interest me, whereas other people could talk about that for hours. The other thing is, most attorneys, not all, are unlikely to do any type of social betterment. I don't know what's important to you. I do believe that people working for companies and things is important work, but most attorneys and law firms will work with any client that has the money to pay. And that's just how it works. Now, there's certain firms, obviously, that are very selective in terms of the matters, and a lot of law firms and things will draw the line of defending different types of people. But they'll defend people with money all day. You're just a hired gun, and that's your job. And you need to, that to you needs to be something that you're enthusiastic doing. You need to be excited to represent people and or companies. And again, if you've been working in a large law firm or any law firm for a few years, you understand that it's mostly about doing what work that people with a lot of money want done. And that's just what it is. And it's often politics in courts. So courts are often, I'm sure you read the news, but there are Democrats and there's Republicans and there's different people in between, and that often influences the results. Court judges often will rule for large corporations or against them, depending on political leanings. This is what you're up against. I'm just telling you how it works, and others don't even read papers. And it's just this is in litigation, obviously, but most of the work you do as an attorney, if you're doing an IPO for a company, it could be out of business in 3 or 4 years. So does that mean that there's anything wrong in the work? No, but if it's important to you to generate good vibes by doing positive things in the world, I will tell you that not all the work of an attorney is positive and is going to create good vibes. Most attorneys do not have a lot of financial success. I can tell you that firsthand. When I meet when you meet very wealthy attorneys, most of them are not practicing law. Now, a lot of them are, but the most highly compensated are generally at the largest firms. But this is a very small percentage of the legal profession. So I'm just telling you, you can go and you can do very well, for example, doing personal injury and all these other practice areas, but it's a hard living because there's so many attorneys you're competing with. And when people are young, meaning when you're in college and you think, wow, I can come out of law school and make all this money, you think that's a lot of money. It is a lot of money for a starting salary. But over the long run, if you were to do the same thing and go into different types of businesses, you could probably do often much better. And so, I mean, I'm not poo-pooing it, but there's professions you wouldn't believe where you can do very well. And being an attorney really isn't much different than saying, I want to move to LA and become a famous actor. It's very hard to be successful because most people don't have the passion for the work that you need to succeed. So it's just how it is. And it's something to understand. It's just because you're smart. None of this, by the way, is about your smarts. So just, you have to get that out of your mind. If you're thinking just because you went to a good law school or you have a good job, that you're going to be financially successful, that's getting the keys to a race car. You still have to race it and be the best racer. Most people that move to LA are never going to be stars. And the same thing occurs with practicing law. And most of the people that are attorneys work for smaller firms or solo practitioners. They work for the government. and they never have the types of careers they thought that they would have when they started practicing law. And it's not very glamorous either. It's most of it is just what he was sitting behind a screen and looking at documents and things and talking to other people doing the same work. I actually find it quite relaxing, and but at the same time, it's not what you think it is. It's just a lot of research and often very tedious work. And there's different practice areas that have a lot of in-person contact, but for the most part, that's what it is. And then this is sad too, but unfortunately, in law firms, the biggest way to measure your success is based on the number of hours and how profitable you are to the firm. So the more hours you bill, the more work you're able to, the better you'll do. They say it's not the quality of the, I say it's not the quality of the work. You typically will get a lot of hours if you do good quality work, but your success is more driven by hours and the amount of time you're away from your home and family than by your dedication to the law firm. And what does that mean? It means that if you're away from your family a long time, it makes having marriages hard. It makes growing up, some of the most screwed up kids I knew, their parents were lawyers in big firms. Their parents never spent time with them. There's just a lot of drawbacks to all this. And especially when your compensation and your security is based on how many hours you bill. I've seen people miss children's births, and it's just, and that's okay. I'm not saying it's, no, it's not okay. Most firms, they can be seen in the office every weekend. People work remotely now, but at the same time, these hours are expected, and bonuses are based on the hours you work. And so a lot of people don't like that, and they think that they can do better doing other things. And you know what? You're right. You can, if your goal is financial security or finances, yes, with those type of hours, put it into a lot of other professions, you can actually do very well. And so I'm going to tell you that if you're not happy doing this and you feel like you're that, then maybe one of these alternative careers is going to be better, because the skill and motivation you have to go to law school and to do well there, then to be concerned about where you're working and then to become aggressive and to be around all these other people that are just completely crazy and trying to eat you alive. It's a very competitive profession. So I think it's pretty obvious if you're doing it any length of time. But I remember I knew this, but I was with this partner, and he'd been a partner in a big firm, and I had retired and very successful, making probably $4 or $5 million a year by the time he was in his late 30s, just doing very well. But he was saying one of the reasons he quit was because it wasn't just that the work was stressful and the hours were long. It was that even his peers were out to get him, and that just that's not fun. So people are trying to steal his clients, undermine him. It's a hard job with those sorts of skills, and you can do very well in a lot of other fields. I've seen people I saw one guy have to leave a big firm, and this is another guy who was making one of the highest paid partners in the entire Midwest probably, and started a private equity company and just blowing it out of the water and so much more happy. There's so many careers you can do with a law degree, and a lot of them make good sense for people. But before I start these careers, the big thing I want to tell you is that it doesn't really matter what these careers are. It's just doing what you like and what motivates you and what comes naturally to you. So I did something funny. So on BCG, we have these tests, they're DISC profiles. And so you can go to BCG and you can take one. If you have taken one, we're actually redoing the reports, and so the new reports are much better. But it's DISC profile tests, and it's basically if someone's dominant, for dominant and fluent, I don't know, but these tests, and then there's different people that are very good for certain things. So you can take these tests, and so I took it, and I have a certain, I'm not going to tell you what I am, but it doesn't matter. But I have a certain profile. It's pretty rare for attorneys to have the type of profile I do. It's like probably 1% of the population has this makeup. And then I was like, okay, I'm going to solicit applications to BCG. And so I put out this recruiter ad and got, I don't know, 5,000 applications or something. Now, it's also because I have the ability to contact people in our database and ask them if they're interested. So it's not everybody in the world is applying to just, would you be interested? Yes. And then you can submit. But anyway, then I solicited every one of those 5,000 people. And I was like, how many would you take this test? And then people took the test. And then the number of people that came back with this personality profile like I have, because I love recruiting, is it was very low. I'm not even going to tell you, but it was like, I think it was 7 initially, but it was 7 because not everyone took the personality test, maybe half or 1/3, but right up there. And then I started interviewing these 7 people and I couldn't believe it. They were just perfect. And it was just the most natural thing in the world, and because they had the right personality. And they were people universally that had a really bad run with not a great experience, not feeling the legal environment was welcoming and whatever. And then this job came along and they're just perfect. And I used to just hire people and be like, oh, this person has this great qualification. This is perfect. And that's not how you should be choosing jobs. You shouldn't choose jobs based on because everybody else there went to a great school or went to work at a big firm. You should choose jobs based on the matching what you're interested in. And it doesn't matter what you're interested in. You could be interested in yarn and knitting and start a huge yarn knitting company. You could be interested in fitness and it doesn't matter, because whatever you do, I know one lawyer and he's in a business group. He represents, who does he represent? Evander Holyfield in these boxing gyms. He's franchising those, and he's from I think he's from a Magic Circle firm in the UK, and as happy as can be doing that. And there's a fitness guy, but it's just, there's so many professions you can do, and it doesn't matter. I'm going to tell you a bunch, and these will just give you some ideas, but there's so many things you can do. You can be a civil rights investigator, for example. My mom did that. That's fun. You can find things to do there. I don't want to talk. You can be an administrator in a law firm. If you like the law and you want to work in a law firm and you just are more interested in the business side and not practicing, that's another great job. There's recruiting jobs in law firms. There's HR jobs. There's all sorts of things. But the way it should work too for you, by the way, with a job, I just want to, and as you're listening to these professions I've given you today, the way it should work is you should get exposed a little bit to it, and it should like energize you. It should be like, wow, that's exactly what I want to do. That's how it worked with me with recruiting. I was like, are you kidding me? This is a job? And this is how you should think about it. You should think about any type of job. So some people, if you think about being a law firm administrator, like you get to talk to attorneys about this, you need to look at who's billing hours, and you need to help set guidelines, work with partners and other people. This kind of stuff, if it's the right job for you, is freaking awesome. It's exactly what you should be doing. And so some people, you're managing our law firms, and there's a lot of lawyers that did that. There's lawyers you go into these big firms, like these super prestigious firms, Wachtell, and there's people that have been top attorneys there that are doing these. I'm not saying Wachtell is an example, but because I don't know that firm if that's happening, but I'm sure it is. And regardless of the firm, there's people like that have been lawyers there that are doing different types of work there. I saw one guy, this is a true story, at Quinn Emanuel. This guy went to Stanford Law School and decided he wanted to, true story, Stanford Law School, I think he was on whatever, the Stanford Law Review, came to work at Quinn Emanuel, decided he wanted to be a bike messenger for the firm. And then he wrote a book called No L, meaning how he goofed off when he was at Stanford Law. This is a true story. Great. He's a bike messenger. Who cares? Like, that's what makes him happy. And he couldn't be happier. So it's just, you have to do what makes you happy. Now, am I judging him for doing that? No, I don't judge anybody, because you want to do what makes you happy. And you should not care what other people want you to do, because most people go through life trying to live other people's expectations of them. You don't want to do what your parents thought you should do. You don't want to have to represent your family so that everyone can say you're a lawyer. You don't want to have to prove something to your college friends or your people you knew from your town you grew up in. You should do what makes you happy. Bike messenger, great. Who cares? If that makes him happy, that's freaking awesome. I know another guy that got like a 178 or something on the LSATs. The smartest freaking guy you can imagine. Grew up in basically a very bad neighborhood, and it was very funny. Anyway, but very bad neighborhood, and his parents were like these hippies but anyway, and he graduated, and the last thing in the world he wanted to do was work in a law firm. He decided to be a contract attorney and worked and lived very inexpensively and retired by the age of 40. And you can do all sorts of things. And for him, that work mattered, but no one's judging him. You can be a law librarian. Some people like that. a lot of lawyers do. That can be very exciting. You can be a law professor. And if you should be a law professor, you know it. You love ideas. You love thinking about this stuff. And that's a great job. I actually was a law professor. I liked it. I'm interviewing one of my students to be a recruiter that was one of the people that did really well in these tests. I couldn't believe it in a few days. And he actually works in Calabasas, which is over the hill from where I'm at. You can be a law professor. That's a great job. If this is the job for you, it's exactly what you should be doing. And if it gets you excited, I would enjoy being a law professor. I think it was a very fun job. If it's a great job, you can be a career counselor in a law school. A lot of people like that. That's doing the kind of work I'm doing, but working with students and helping them find opportunities and counseling them. That's another great job. There's tons of these jobs. I have, in the history of this company, there's probably people that became recruiters then would rather be advisors. There's been law schools all over the country, the people that have worked for me. They're in, and the head of some of these big career services offices, they're all over in Washington, D.C., and New York, and California, and Midwest. These are great jobs too, and people like them. And one thing I can say is people tend to stick with these jobs. They actually like being a law school career counselor. And you can, and I'm not saying they shouldn't like it, but I'm just saying they love it. They love it more than being a recruiter. You can be an editor. I know lots of people that went to the best law schools that love editing. That's just, and you can do that. That's a very fun job, and people like that. And that's how I met one of my recruiters. She was, I think, working for the LA Daily Journal, a professional editor. And then over years, I talked to her and she learned this. And that's a very fun job. You can be a recruiter, what I do. This is a great job as well. If it's the right fit for you. I could talk all day about what being a recruiter is, but most of it is not what you think it is. Most of it's not cold calling and things. Most of it is, it's almost like litigation because you're positioning people for different things. And a lot of people do enjoy it. I would say one of the things I can say about this profession, I'm not selling people on it, but is that most of the people I know that have chosen to do this, if you end up in the right recruiting firm, then they've stuck with it. There's very few people that I've ever trained that aren't still doing this. They're, again, career counselors. A lot of them are recruiters inside of law firms, a ton of them, but they stuck with the profession. They like the recruiting and the placement, and it's not what you think. It's not. A lot of people always associate with cold calling, and it can be. There's different types of recruiters. That's a fun job. Now, legal writing is another one. I'm sure you probably know that's very similar to editing. Paralegals, same thing. You can instruct paralegals. Private judge is a big one. Now, being a private judge, you can actually be a judge very easily. You can be a municipal judge. You can be a private judge. You can be administrative law judges. There's all sorts of judges. And a lot of people like that. I had a case once where I was 3 or 4 years out of, how long? Let me, I don't know, 5 or 6 years out of law school and went before a judge. And the judge, it was a employment judge about something where someone was trying to get something from me. I don't remember. It was an employment thing. And the judge was someone I went to law school with. And so it's just, there's lots of judges out there, and there's private judges, and being a judge is a great job. And there's lots of opportunity to be a judge. Once you go to law school, there's a lot of opportunity to be a judge. You can work for the state bar. There's a lot of jobs there. Actors, there's a ton of actors and people in the entertainment industry that are, for whatever reason, lawyers do very well at that. I love acting. I took acting lessons for years just because it was fun. I liked the people. The people were the nicest people I'd ever met in my life, and they're just different and very. It didn't feel competitive compared to working with attorneys. But this is a very fun thing. You can be, and there's lots of very well-known actors that have gone to law school, and you can get into different people and do that. It's a sort of thing where you can learn about it over time, and that's fun. And it's attorneys can do very well. I had an interesting thing. I'll just talk about this with acting, because a lot of times you may be thinking, and this is a very important point. So you may be thinking about, why would I become an actor? That's impossible. Why would I do this? Some guy, a famous acting coach said to me when I was like, why would I try this? It's impossible. He said, it doesn't matter what you do. If you're successful in recruiting, or you're successful practicing law, or you're successful, people that are successful in one endeavor are always successful if they apply themselves in another one, meaning whatever moves you made to be successful, whatever you're doing now, and are going to make you successful if you just choose to become an actor. See, meaning he was saying that even though it looks impossible, you can do it because you're applying it. And that's the same thing with lawyers. If you apply yourself in whatever you're doing, if you think you're doing well, if you did well getting into a good law school, that's a lot right there. And then you got into a good firm, or you've started out at you started out at a bad law school or not a great law school, and then you got into an okay firm, and now you're at a better firm and a better firm. Well, that means you probably would be a good actor. You can be an airline pilot. I know a girl that I went to law school with that's now a partner in a big firm, I think in South Carolina. She went in actually the Navy and flew fighter jets after law school, even though she had never had anything to do with the military before that. And you can become an airline pilot. It's not too hard to become an airline pilot. You have to go to school, but a lot of people like that. And you can go to school right now as long as you're the right age, and it's a very good career path, and there's a lot of demand. There's analysts. That's a business analyst. It's not, but that's a lot of people inside of consulting firms and so forth are analysts and have gone to law school. Arbitrators, very similar to a private judge, but there's lots of people that are attorneys that do that. You can be a legal arbitrator. You can arbitrate different types of disputes, but these are also very good jobs as well. Lots of people become artists, different types of artists. I know maybe like a paint, or you can different types of art, but there's just a lot of skills you get as an attorney that you can do that with. And artists can often bring a different perspective to their work because of their being attorneys. And authors are a huge one. I sold a house once that I lived in a long time ago. I don't know, 15 years ago or more, to a woman named Gail Hurd, who was a director, and she used to be married to James Cameron. It was his house in Pasadena, and she was married to a guy that had also gone to University of Virginia Law School that was a script writer. So a lot of script writers, and he'd written Con Air and these other things, but a lot of professional writers and have gone to law school, and script writers all over Hollywood, and a lot of very famous authors have gone. Being an attorney is great practice to be an author. And so that's another thing you can do. There's tons of bankers that are attorneys, and they're very good bankers. They go into things like they go into private equity, which is venture capital, which isn't necessarily banking, but it's similar types of stuff. Lawyers are great at business development in top corporations and all over the world. A lot of the heads of business development have been people that have gone to law school. I don't know why attorneys do so well in it, but it's business development is going out and taking complex things about different business ideas and encapsulating them and bringing in business. These can be very highly paid jobs. Big companies, they can pay well into the 7 figures for the right people, and you can do very well. You need to be able to communicate, have a lot of negotiation ability and partnerships. And a lot of attorneys go to business school. I would say if you're an attorney right now and you're a corporate attorney, now is a very good time to go to business school because the economy does appear to be slowing down. It's a great move because what happens is you go to business school, it's 2 years. When you get out, the economy's better. And people always, for whatever reason, like hiring business school students to be corporate attorneys. If they've been corporate attorneys beforehand, they always seem to get jobs. And it's just a good thing to do if you're interested in business. And it's just an extra degree that can help you. You learn how to interact with business people. It's just a very smart thing to do. I would recommend it if you're concerned about employment stability. If you're a corporate attorney that's been laid off, it's just a great thing to do because it takes care of a gap on your resume and then gives you a good education. And I think attorneys that do it seem to do very well. A lot of law firms love it when they have people that have MBAs, especially from top 25 schools and things. It's a great thing to have. A lot of attorneys can become chefs. I'm not going to talk too much about that, but if it's something that you like, obviously, you can be a great chef, so it can be very successful. You can open restaurants. There's all sorts of things you can do. And if it's something you enjoy, again, you have to go with what motivates you. Lots of CEOs of big companies are former attorneys. I don't know why that is, but I'm assuming it's because of their motivation. You can be it's not just practicing law, it's using all your skills to do that. What a CEO does is they have to come up with a direction for the company and the organization based on a lot of things that are going on to help the company meet its goals. They have to understand a lot of things. So this could be a good thing for you in the long run, or sometimes attorneys, I've seen them just plop into that role, but it's definitely something that if you look at the Fortune 500, a lot of them are former attorneys. Same thing with CFOs. CFOs, not just looking at numbers, it's also making financial decisions and forecasting. So they can do very well at that. And same thing with COOs. That's an operating officer, which is just basically understanding how people and organizations are looking at the financial, looking at what the CEO is trying to do, and then coming up with ideas based on that. Tax administrator, something I've seen a lot of people go to law school do, and then they do it even though many times they didn't even take the bar. So that's a good job as well. e-discovery consultant. That's a huge field right now. And people do very well. I've seen people start companies and become very successful. I've seen people start companies and sell them for a lot of money. I've seen people just do it consistently and really enjoy themselves doing it. It's a great profession, and there's definitely a lot of future in it, especially because there's a lot of different software programs and things that are coming out. And then you could even start a software company. A lot of agents and our people become agents in the entertainment business or in the sports. Attorneys are just very well suited to do that. It's just a lot of negotiation, and it can be a lot of fun. People seem to like that. Attorneys can do very well doing that. And a lot of attorneys are. I've seen a lot of attorneys actually leave big firms and start sports agencies and entertainment agencies and do well. And I'm like, wow. It's just because what we always like, if someone applies to BCG, I'll look them up and I'll be like, oh, this person, and then I'll like look them up, like, where are they now? And then I'll look them up and they have this big sports agency. It's fun. And I've seen it a lot. Like, I mean, it happens like with regularity, at least once or twice every 6 months or so. It happens a lot. Entrepreneur is the biggest one. I don't know what to say about being an entrepreneur other than if you are an entrepreneur, you know it. And what that means is it means that you just spend your time thinking about different fun businesses to start. And I will say one thing about being an entrepreneur, just that I would recommend to you, is you don't start a business. There are people that do this, but typically start a business because it's something you're interested in or some sort of skill you have. So an example would be like, like we talked about being a chef. So if you really enjoy cooking and you're coming up with these new recipes and writing ideas down for them or experimenting, you can't wait to get home and cook on the weekends. Like those are the kind of people that would probably be great at starting a restaurant or catering. But your business, if you want to be an entrepreneur, should be related to something that you have skill and you already have a pre-existing passion in, like the idea I gave you earlier about soap company. And that attorneys do just really well as entrepreneurs. They're all over. There's lots of people too, by the way, which I'll give you, if you've taken the bar and haven't passed, there's lots of people that took the bar and started businesses because they didn't pass the bar, or in California, I mean, and it became incredibly successful. But entrepreneurs, typically, the whole idea of an entrepreneur, and I'll just be very quick because I realize this is an idea. We do have a few more of these to cover, but then I'm just trying to help you come up with ideas. And I know I'm cognizant that one thing I say could change the direction of your career. And so I want to make sure that I give each of these a little bit of time, and especially this one. But the thing about an entrepreneur is entrepreneurs, like good ones, like if you look at businesses, like what I'm in is a profession, like it's evolving, like this is legal recruiting. It's entrepreneurial, but it's like an entrepreneur is different. It's someone that goes out and is consistently finding needs in the market. So they'll say, instead of I use this machine called the tonal to do lifting weights and stuff. So it uses electromagnetics, and it was started by an electrical engineer that thought it doesn't make sense to have all these weights. And so these people can see a need that's based on some skills that they have in the market that they can fill, or someone comes up with an idea for some sort of product that isn't being filled, a new way of doing things. I saw something the other day where like a very popular fitness thing is going into, or what is it, chill tanks, like these where people jump in these chill tanks and to chill their body down after working out or after getting up. And I saw some guy that was selling one for $700. It was basically like he modified a freezer or something from Sears, one of those big freezers. There's just instead of a thing that normally costs $5. So entrepreneurs just come up with fun ideas based on things that they see in the market that aren't being done well. If you saw any product and it's just how it works. And so if that's the way you think and you're always looking at things and coming up with ideas, then you'd probably be a good entrepreneur. But that's entrepreneurs. It's not just doing what other people are doing. It's trying to come up with ideas that are an improvement on the way things are done, or just starting businesses. And some people don't have the skills to come up with these ideas. And then those people that want to have their own business, you can run franchises. There's all sorts of things you can do. And that's entrepreneurial to a great extent as well. It was funny when there's these career tests you can take that will tell you the type of work that you should be doing. And I don't remember, but the first one I took was a long time ago. And what it said I should do was be an FBI agent, which I thought was fun. And this is to be an FBI agent, you need to have an advanced degree. So going to law school is a great skill for being an FBI agent. And so you are automatically can be considered to do it. And FBI agents, people love it. It can be a great job. It has a lot of prestige, obviously. Money's okay. It's not bad. And you can really do a lot of very cool things as an FBI agent. And attorneys can be excellent FBI agents. And it's a good job. It's not just running around with a gun. It's like a lot of interviewing and fact gathering and working with people. You get to get out of the office. It's just be a really fun car. And they job and they do get in shootouts and stuff, but I think it'd be awesome. And so that's a really fun thing you can do with a law degree. And again, you need an advanced degree, and attorneys are great prospects to be FBI agents. Financial advisor is a great job. A lot of people probably don't know what it is, but it's basically it's just like being an attorney. You develop a big book of people that rely on you to manage their investments for them, and then you get a percentage of their portfolio, however that works. It's 1% or 2%. I don't know what numbers are, but you get a percentage of that each year, and that's how you get compensated, or you get compensated when they trade. And people do very well in that. I know people that came out of college and didn't know, were aimless and did this. And when I say aimless, they didn't know if they wanted to go to business school, they didn't know if they wanted to go to law school or whatever they wanted to do. So they took these jobs and developed these huge books of business. And you can do extremely well financially. When I say extremely well, much better than, especially in big markets where there's a lot of people with a lot of money, because you're just imagine if you have $100 million under that you're managing and you're getting 1% of that per year, that's $1 million. And if you have 500 million, you can do the math. It's 5, and sometimes it's even more. It could be like 1.5% or 2%. And so you can make a lot of money. And it's just about making sure that you develop a book of business and give good advice. And you can do it for a lot of different people, or you can do it I know one guy, I could talk all day about financial advisors, but it's something if you feel like you have these types of skills and you would be good at it, that I would recommend looking into. I know one guy that was very young. He sold a business, some app or something for tens of millions of dollars, and then decided to start this and thinks it's the best thing he ever did. This is a great profession, and you can do very well at it. And people do it. A lot of them like it a lot. And so I definitely could be a good job. I love foreign service officers. I think that's one of the coolest jobs you could possibly do. It's very difficult to become a foreign service officer. It's a diplomat job. You can be stationed in all these embassies, and some of them, they're building all these new embassies around the world, and they're very nice, and there's like some of the nicest buildings I've ever seen. You get to work in these nice buildings, and then you get to live in the environment. And I think being a foreign service officer is one of the freaking coolest jobs there are. It's very hard. The test is very difficult, but you're working with very smart people. There's a lot of employment security. I just think it's freaking a great job. Now, a lot of it could be clerical, but at the same time, you're exposed to all sorts of confidential information. You're taking care of U.S. stuff abroad. They do passports, but they also do a lot of diplomatic support, and it's just a really freaking cool job. And the reason I like it so much is I went to school, internationally, so I knew a lot of people whose families did it. I always thought the kids were always very smart, the parents were always very smart. A lot of people that are very highly educated and very smart do this, and people love this job. They also do things like they'll teach you a language. So you might be stationed like in Tokyo, and they'll teach you to speak. They'll spend 6 months or whatever in Monterey or whatever it is, teaching you to speak Japanese. You'll go over there, maybe you'll work there a year, and they'll be like, "Oh, we need you in Greece now," and then they'll send them, and then they have to go learn Greek. So then you come out of there and you're like familiar with all these languages. I think it's an awesome job. I'd love to do it, and if that would be one thing I'd really recommend if you're interested in foreign affairs and politics. And it's just a very prestigious job all around, and they're really cool people that do it. I met a bunch of them 3 or 4 weeks. I just have a lot of respect for that job, and always have. I always like the people a lot, and that would be a good job. Fundraisers, all sorts of businesses have, and whether it's law schools or colleges or businesses or nonprofits have fundraisers. I love fundraisers. At Virginia, there's a guy that comes to LA. He's been Alvarez, really nice guy. He's works for the school, and you form these long-standing relationships. You get to know a lot of people, and you get to go all over the country and help raise money and get to know people. That's a great job. They meet with donors. Attorneys do very well at it, and especially you could do it for your law school. And one of my relatives did it for University of Kansas, and the fun thing about that was he would fly them around in this. They had their own jet that they would use. I guess the sports teams had it or whatever, but he would get to fly on this little plane around the country to meet alumni with the team and things. It's kind of, so it's just, and you can do very well as a fundraiser, and people like it, and you made a lot of friends, and the school appreciates you, the donors appreciate you, and it's just a very positive job. There's a lot of jobs in the government. There's so many jobs in the government. In addition to working for the federal government, there's state governments. So I'd always recommend anyone that's interested in government jobs to potentially go and interview with lots of different government agencies. If you go to Law Crossing, there's tens of thousands of government jobs. There's each state has its own government jobs, and each municipality has government jobs. But if you don't like a law firm or in-house, you'd be crazy not to look at these jobs. And frankly, some of them pay very well, and especially in some cities like Chicago, and you can do very well. And it's just very cool, like the kind of work you can do for the government. It's a great place to be an attorney, but it doesn't have to be practicing law. And I think if I was to thinking about alternative careers, I would definitely recommend the government. And there's different types of government jobs. So there's ones that are good fits for different types of people. I had a guy once that was working for me he was from Berkeley, and he was about as far left as they come. And I'm not saying that in a critical way, but he was able to get a job. First, he worked at a nonprofit, and they were he didn't think they were far left enough. And then he finally got a job with the California state government, and he's just couldn't be happier. And I saw him a few years ago, and he found the right place. And again, I'm not saying this critically, but it was the ability to implement the way the world should be from the standpoint of a particular government agency that he joined in an HR perspective. And you could do that if you're far right in different, I don't know, Texas, but maybe not Texas anymore, but at least not us, but different places, and maybe West Texas. But the point is that there's just a lot of different places where you can work in the government, and there's so many jobs. It would amaze you, and a lot of them are very good. And so you should definitely look at that. The other one I brought up is HR director. This is a great job. I know lots of people that are HR directors. HR is an awesome field. I think people inside of law firms love the job. There's recruiting directors and recruiting coordinators and directors of HR. It's because you have a lot of authority, and you're making decisions about people, and you're learning about different types of people, and you're overseeing recruiting. You're making sure things are done a certain way, and you're forming the culture of where it is. And I know people that have been partners in law firms doing employment in different practice areas, and then went into work at companies, and they were so good at HR that the company promoted them to be a COO and then a CEO. And so the HR is just this is obviously the field I'm in, but it's just a great field for people, and you can do very well there, and people love it. If you're interested in people and policies and onboarding and all the sorts of things, it's definitely worth investigating the sort of things that HR people do. And the big thing about HR that I'll tell you, it's a hidden secret, but not really a hidden secret, but your job in HR really is to be an advocate for employees. So the company always it's trying to save money and do all these different things, but most HR directors are advocates for the employees. And so you want to create the best environment, and you want to make people happy and try to influence things that way. So people seem to really like that. And then you also monitor employee performance and see how things work there as well. Investment banking is a huge one. I would lump this in with the venture capital and all that, but so many attorneys go into that and do very well. I would say that the personality type for that tends to be more corporate attorney as opposed to like litigator, but you can do exceptionally well from a financial standpoint and different standpoints. A lot of investment bankers come out of the legal industry, and so that's another thing you can get into. You could also go to business school and then become an investment banker. There's all sorts of things you can do. Journalist is a great one. Lots of very well-known journalists have gone to law school, and journalism is fun. You get to investigate things and write about them and shape public perceptions, and it's a very good alternative career. And a lot of people really do enjoy it, and you're communicating the news to the public, and it can be a very rewarding profession. And from a financial standpoint, it may not pay what practicing law does, but if you get good at it, you can do things like write books, and you can be a television journalist, and a lot of people that get on TV news, there's just all sorts of things you can do. And attorneys are very good at that because you learn to gather facts and how to synthesize information, all that sort of thing. And then that can make you very effective. And attorneys also are very good at it because they can absorb a lot of information and then consolidate it into very simple to understand things. That, by the way, my grandfather, for example, I was talking about earlier, was a well-known journalist, and he had that ability to take very complex matters of like foreign affairs and things and make them very easily to understand to a group. The average person that reads most newspapers has a fifth grade understanding of, or you have to be able to communicate at that level, and he could do that. Labor negotiator is another one, and this isn't a very popular one, but that would be something to consider. Literary agents, same sort of thing. They assist authors. It's like being a sports agent. Lobbyist is a huge one. So lobbyist is a very good profession for attorneys. You don't have to do it in Washington, D.C. You can do it at any state capital. You can do it in local areas. You can do it for companies. You do it for special interest groups, and you try to influence the legislation. This is just an overall awesome career for people. Attorneys do very well at it. It's very exciting work, and they typically will. Your idea is that if someone has an interest, you have to go in and try to influence the politics and politicians to your point of view by persuading them of different things. Attorneys do great at this type of job. You may like that because you feel very connected to the organization you're representing. You get a lot of satisfaction by influencing policy. And then you also, people love it. I know a lot of people or candidates of mine that have done it, and people that I've placed, you can actually go back and practice law after being certain types of lobbyists, do well. Management consultant's another one. That's a lot of where you go into companies and businesses and you consult on different management issues and things. Can do very well doing that. And there's not a lot to tell you about management consultant, just because it probably wouldn't make sense for most people unless you have a little bit of a business background. But attorneys do very well at that. You can do aspects of it. You can also become a management consultant, meaning you might have been practicing for a few years and then you can go into some kind of program at Arthur Andersen or one of these types of companies. I wouldn't say Arthur Andersen, obviously, but there's a lot of Bain and other places where you can become a management consultant. And then marketing director is a huge one. So marketing directors, attorneys also do very well at marketing. I don't know why it is, but they tend to have a lot of them with marketing. So marketing could be social media, it could be emails, it could be advertising, it could be coming up with campaigns and managing people, all sorts of people doing it. And attorneys tend to do very well doing that type of job. And a lot of marketing directors at big companies are there. I talked earlier about journalists. Lots of attorneys are media and television hosts. I don't know why that is, but I know Laura Ingraham went to the University of Virginia Law School. And she was actually a Supreme Court clerk too. She's got a show called The Ingraham Angle and everything. And lots of people that went to law school become media hosts, and you can do it for political parties. You can do it politically. You can do it for another woman I know named Harmeet Dillon that also went to University of Virginia Law School that I've known for several years. I think also does some hosting on, I think it's Fox and CNN and I don't think she doesn't work for CNN, but I'm saying every network, whether it's Fox or CNN or local networks, have lots of attorneys that are media hosts, and that's fun. And I know lots of people that I know. Someone in this business group I'm in has a show on Court TV. He's on that every Wednesday. His name's Nima. And there's just so many positions you can do as a media host. You can go into the military. Lots of attorneys do that. I think that's cool too. And you can do that. And it's a good option. You can do it right. You can do it as a young attorney and go into the military. You can work for the JAG. You could be a motivational speaker. This is just a fun one, but when I say motivational speaker, it could be talking about the Bible. It could be talking about your religion. It could be talking about anything, but a lot of attorneys do that. They also a lot of times become comedians. It's a good one if you like music. News commentators, a similar one like I talked about earlier with the reporters and journalists. You can always go get a PhD. I think that's pretty cool as well if you like studying things. And the nice thing about getting a PhD is a lot of times you'll get a stipend, so you'll be paid while you're doing it. I think especially if you want to go into anything science related, you could get a PhD in something like engineering to be even more marketable as a patent attorney, or you could just get a PhD in a field. I think for people that are academic, it's good. A policy analyst, I'm not going to talk too much about that. That's very similar to obviously lobbying and other types of things. Lots of attorneys obviously become politicians. As a matter of fact, it's one of the most common fields for attorneys to get into. If that's natural to you, then it's something you should be doing. I'm personally not motivated in that direction. And again, it's not the sort of thing that I understand. I have relatives that have been politicians. One of my families has a statue in the White House or in the Capitol Dome, John James Ingalls, for being a senator from Kansas. But I'm certainly not anywhere near that motivated in that direction, but some people are. And if you are, you can leave a legacy for your family. Everyone in my family still talks about the fact that this guy was a senator 130 years ago. Think about that. So you can really do amazing things. And politicians obviously are some of the most important people in the world. And look at what Bill Clinton or Obama or all these people have done that are attorneys. And it's huge. You become an advocate for the public as opposed to just an individual. And if you are motivated in that direction, I'm more power to you, and I give you should do it if you're motivated by something like that. That's awesome. And again, this is the sort of thing like being an entrepreneur where you just know naturally if that's something you want to do. The next one is a preacher. There's 60 of these, by the way, so we're almost done. But a lot of people do like that. That's the sort of thing that would come naturally. I guess we're only going to do 50 naturally to a lot of people. So in conclusion, there's just a lot of different professions you can do. I know lots of people that I believe that are practicing law that would probably be better off doing one of these other professions. What? Private investigator? All right, I guess I'll run through these real quickly. Real estate agent. I'll go back to, that's weird, the conclusion came up. That's pretty funny. Someone's in trouble, obviously. But a lot of attorneys can become private investigators. That's a very common thing. There's very good private investigators out there that charge a lot of money and have very specific special services, which can be fun. I can find out kind of anything about anyone. A real estate agent's a great one. A lot of times people, especially if you work in like major markets and in very expensive housing markets, or you can work in commercial real estate, but real estate agents, people that like that, are often very good at promoting themselves and can do very well financially. One of the things about being a real estate agent, it's one of these things where it should almost be natural to you to do it. You like the idea of people, you like the idea of bringing out the best in houses or buildings or whatever you're selling, and then lots of attorneys are also real estate developers. One thing I would say about real estate developers, it's funny. I remember years ago, I was working with this woman that I think she wanted to develop a vineyard or winery or something, and she wanted to tell me about it and then have her. And I was talking to someone else about her, and I was like, how is they just conceptualizing this idea of this? And she'd built this model and everything. And he said, well, it's just natural. Like, it's just genetic. People come up with these ideas genetically. Salesperson, attorneys make great salespeople. I don't really need to say much more about that. I've talked about a lot of different sales jobs, but I think just so you understand the types of money you can make selling things. Someone that works really hard at sales, if you're selling fairly decent ticket items, can make much more than you would ever make practicing law. Most of really good salespeople, not all of them, but a lot of them. Many times, if you're not getting a lot of satisfaction doing whatever you're doing, I had an instance where I was buying a pickup truck, I don't know, a couple of years ago, and I was talking to the finance manager, financing this pickup truck, and he was telling me how his 1-year-old son or something was making $250,000 a year selling cars in a dealership and had only been doing it for 6 months. I'm just telling you, like, wow, think about that. So it's just a lot of times, and I'm not saying that every dealership you can make that, because most people don't make that much money. He was obviously natural at it, but a lot of times people look at jobs and they don't really realize how successful you can be if you're good at it. Screenwriter, I talked about that already. Stockbroker, I talked about that. Financial teacher, again, this is a huge job. It's just something that should appeal to you naturally. There's a huge demand for teachers. If this is something you want to do, I don't think you would have any problem if you've gone to law school getting a teacher, being a teacher anywhere. I think these jobs pay well. I think they're exciting. I think you're helping people. And I think there should be more great teachers. And you could be any type of teacher, but undergraduate professor. I know lots of attorneys that have gone and done that, as well as graduate school. There's a huge demand. So if you apply for these types of jobs, you can definitely often get them, especially with having a law degree. I was a law professor when I was a second-year attorney, or maybe first-year attorney. So it's not, and if I wanted to teach in college, I could too. So you can definitely get these jobs. Even teaching legal subjects, union organizer, that's, again, the sort of thing that would come to you naturally. Westlaw and Lexis is another one. I'm sure most people are familiar with that. These are just a lot of different careers. I'm not going to get into all of these, but they're all on the BCG website. I'm not going to go through all these, and I will, but there's just, you should read up all of these in the article. I'll put this, we're almost done. I'll put these in the chat later on the article. But that's pretty much the presentation. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take a quick break just for 1 or 2 minutes. And then when I come back, we'll take live questions. I hope this has been helpful. I know this is a long webinar. But I also feel like it's very important, just because I feel like a lot of people do think about this sort of thing and what they want to do. And when I'm giving you this, I've been doing what I'm doing for 25 years. I tried to spend a lot of time in the beginning telling you why sometimes thinking about these other things is a mistake, but also that the grass can be greener for a lot of people. And the final thing I would leave you with before I take a quick break and come back and do questions is just that you have so much potential. Don't allow being in a bad situation where you're not appreciated, or where you don't feel like you're learning, or where people don't care about you, or where you don't believe the work is important. Don't allow that to define you and be unhappy. You need to take your interest and push it into something else. And people make money and are successful and happy doing all sorts of things. And so you don't have to be practicing law to be happy, and you shouldn't care. Your ego shouldn't influence what you do. Your happiness should influence what you think you should do. And so I always, when I think about people that are unhappy practicing law, I think about, okay, what if some people are just meant to do certain things. Would Jerry Seinfeld make a good professional hockey player? It's no, but why? Maybe he would, I don't know. People should not be in the wrong jobs. And you need to be in something that empowers you, where your natural instincts are brought out, and your natural happiness, and where it feels right, and where you're comfortable. And like when I was talking about tax law, like where you can see everything unfolding and a vision for yourself. Because if you're not doing that's bad, and it's not. And again, practicing law should frankly have those elements like in it for you, or else you can do something else, which is great. And there's a lot of other professions, but it should be something that naturally appeals to you. All right, so let's take a quick break for 1 or 2 minutes, and I'll come back and I will answer as many questions as people have about this presentation. This is a live webinar, or anything just related to your career. So, thanks. I have a lot of questions. I'm going to start with some of the later ones. This is one from 11, and there were a lot earlier, but I'll start with some of the later ones just for fun and move around. And oh, by the way, so with these questions, if your name shows up, this is all confidential. And I think attorneys are always careful about protecting their confidence, which is actually good, because I think one of the things you learn in law school is that you can't trust people a lot of times, and you have to, and that's okay. But yeah, these are all confidential, so I won't use your name. Okay, this is, I dropped out of 2 partners before becoming an attorney, and despite extensive edits, my resume still gives this away, and firms pick up on it very easily. Are firms looking askance of me for this reason because of commitment concerns related? Do you have any tips on how to further emphasize multiple career prohibits? I've been hiding my major for starters. Okay, yeah, you don't have to put down your major. You just have to put the name of the school you went to. That's the first thing. Firms can pick up on it, but there's nothing to be ashamed of. It's actually good to have had other careers before going to law school. I think that there is some age discrimination in the legal profession. So that may be what you're coming up against, but at the same time, having another career prior to going to law school isn't really that big of a deal. A lot of times you can put down you went to college and you graduated, and then you put down your legal experience and then prior experience. What I would recommend for you, so a lot of times people will be in one industry. So you might have been like in the maritime industry or the healthcare industry, or I don't know what the industry you're in, but whatever the industry is, a lot of times you're better off trying to go into a career that's related to the industry that you're in prior to going to law school. Someone that was in the healthcare industry would do very well trying to become a healthcare attorney, or someone that was in the, I don't know, get the idea. So people like that. And so having experience in a certain industry can be very helpful when you try to do that. Okay, this is a crazy question, but I'm not criticizing the person for answering it. But this is just, I'm glad. It's crazy, not because it's a question that everyone would have. It's crazy because people ask this. Is it still possible to have success as a lawyer if one was rejected by all the top 14 law schools? Yes, of course it can. Jeez. Okay, so first of all, the law school you go to is only a function of your ability to get into a good law school. So You get into a good law school by getting good grades and doing well in the LSATs. That's pretty much it. And then the quality of undergraduate you went to is also weighted to some extent. No, it doesn't matter where you go to law school. That's absolutely insane. And I'm sorry for those of you that are, why it's insane to worry about law school, why it isn't. Now, going to a good law school is helpful. Let me to worry about law school. Let's go. So let me just explain it to you. So there's basically different types of attorneys. There's attorneys that need social intelligence or social intelligence, and there's ones that need academic intelligence. Okay, and the reason I'm just writing this down. Okay, so if you want to be, academic intelligence, yes. So if you want to be like a commercial litigator, meaning you pretty much need to be really smart to do that, because otherwise people are going to make arguments around it. If you want to be a patent attorney, if you want to be a corporate attorney, you need to be smart to do these jobs. Now, I'm not saying that you can do it if you're not, you can't do it if you're not smart, and that could probably constitute, but you need to be smart. And again, smartness, it does, just because you can go to a top law school doesn't mean you're smart. But if you got, I'm just saying hypothetically, if you get 50th percentile in your LSATs, you're smart, you're fine, but you can do all these jobs. But if you get like the 20th percentile or whatever, or 30th, then you may not have natural aptitude, but that doesn't mean you can't be an incredible freaking lawyer. Geez. But for attorneys that need social intelligence, you have a lot of other practice areas. The big one, of course, is personal injury. Personal injury, like, okay, the saw chopped off someone's hand. Okay, that's pretty clear. Like liability, it's just you have to be able to fight to get the client. You have to fight to get a high personal injury. So a lot of personal injury attorneys barely graduated from law school, but the most successful ones. Immigration. I'm not saying that you can do these, but there's a lot of practice areas where your social intelligence, your ability to deal with people is more important than any type of, because most of your consumer facing practice areas, meaning working directly with consumers. So when I say social intelligence, things other than your ability to come up with very complex arguments and be super smart. Like I could not in a million years be a patent attorney. It just wouldn't work. I can do commercial litigation, but I'm not smart enough to be a patent attorney. I don't have enough ability to sit down and concentrate on physics or electrical engineering. It's just impossible. So I'm telling you, no. And if you're trying to do something like this and you don't have the smarts, that's insane. So there's nothing not wrong. You can go to a bottom of the barrel law school, the worst law school there is, and become the most successful personal injury attorney in the country. Do you think, Johnny Cochran, do you think he was the best law student and went to a top law school? Do you think that Jeffrey Feiger in Michigan, who's got a huge law firm and represents most of these most successful attorneys, did not go to the best law schools and not even do very well, because that's not what matters. So I want to be clear. The law school you go to doesn't mean just because it doesn't matter. You just go into a practice area that uses your skills. Come on. You don't need, I'm sorry to rain in your parade. Now, again, if you want to represent General Motors, like suing Tesla or something, yeah, you're going to need to be really freaking smart. If you want to do IP litigation, you're going to need to be smart. And so that's why the law school matters and to get a job with a big firm. But why do you need a big firm? You don't need to go to work at a big firm. There's all sorts of jobs you can do in other practice areas. So most of your consumer-facing practice areas do not require it. Why do you think these attorneys, you think these people that are advertising in the back of buses and things or advertising on television and doing class actions, do you think they all went to a top 14 law school? No. So everybody that's thinking that they need to be a summer associate in a big firm or go to a top law school to be successful practicing law is insane. So this is what everybody thinks. So I'm saying everybody's insane, but that's just the dumbest thing I've ever heard, because it's just complete nonsense. It's beyond nonsense. Now, if you think success is only working in a big law firm, great, but who cares? That's like saying I can only be a successful author I don't know, but it's like saying you can only be successful at something if you're at the top of that. But these are different skills. Some people are good at, it's just no. So you either go into practice area that needs social intelligence, in which case the law school you went to is completely meaningless, as well as how you did there. It doesn't matter. It's nonsense. Or you go to a big firm that needs academic intelligence. Yes, big law firms need academic intelligence, most of them. Not all practice areas have that. Sometimes in big law firms, there are practice areas where they hire people that don't necessarily have the best academic intelligence. Some of those would be, again, I'm not being critical here, but trust in the states and some big firms, sometimes family law. Family law is another one. Social intelligence mainly. It's not, again, there's a bunch of, most of your consumer facing practice areas are going to require more social intelligence. I want to make sure that everyone's very clear about this distinction. And I'm not harping on this, but I keep hearing this over and over again. I was concerned about the law school and whether they were a summer associate no, why would you want to work in a firm where everybody's got different skills than you and where you're never going to do well anyway? Come on. If I wanted to be a patent attorney, like that would be the dumbest possible decision that I could make. And I would feel badly about myself because I'm not a patent attorney. No, I'm a commercial litigator, fine. Family law, sure. But you don't do things you don't want to be with people that don't want you. And again, you can be and by the way, I just want to make sure make this person very clear on this. If you do not go to a top law school, let me just make sure everyone understands this. If I do not go to a top law school, does this mean I'll never work in a big firm? So this question makes me mad as well. Wow. Absolutely not. Now, why is that? There's a bunch of reasons. The first thing is, if you go to any law school and you do really well there, you can work in a big firm in the city. You can go work in a big firm. Now, is that the case? So, for example, if you go to, let's say, again, I'm from Detroit, so you go to Wayne State and you finish top of your class, you can work in any big firm in Detroit. And if you get into a big firm in Detroit and you do well there in the right practice area, you can move to Chicago or New York. No, it's just not. Now, if you don't do well, that doesn't matter either. So you can, if you're in the right practice area, you can always move up. So, I'm not going to tell you what those are, but you can move up. So that would be mainly things like corporate, real estate, transactional typically is where it's at. So transactional. And then they don't care about your law school really that much either. Now, even if you're not in the right practice area, ultimately, the only thing that matters to get into a big firm, and this can be at any point in your career, is business. You're not going to get into Gibson Dunn or Skadden or something, even if you get a big book and you go to a 10th-year law. Most of the firms are going to be open to you if you develop a big book of business. And so that's pretty much how it works. Just because you didn't go to a top, and again, you take a look at all the top law firms and the partners there and just go look at them. They didn't all go to top law schools, and many of them transferred in there later in their career. So none of this stuff matters. And I'm telling you this because I know the way law students think. I know the way people think and how worried you are about your grades and how worried people are about the prestige of their firm. You can get business and move to a really good firm much later in your career. It's not hard. It happens all the time. And if you start your career at the age of 25 and at 40, you have no business and you're an associate somewhere, and then all of a sudden at 43, you're at a small firm and you bring in a couple of huge clients, you're suddenly at one of the largest firms in the world. This is what happens. And that's why I recommend everyone, it doesn't matter. So none of this stuff, I just want to be very clear, matters. There's always a way forward in the legal profession, regardless of what law school you went to. Okay, so I hope that helps. Okay, so what is this? I don't know how much this answer to this question will help you, but I'm going to answer it just out of courtesy to everyone that's asking questions. Okay. Why do some people who graduate law school and pass the bar exams opt not to pursue a career in the legal field? Okay, the reason is because a lot of people do this because I think, first of all, some people just, and this could be you, some people just don't want to practice law. They feel turned off by it, or they just want to get the degree, or they don't feel like there's a warm welcome, or they get so turned off by law school that they don't want to become attorneys. I don't think that's a good decision all the time. I think that, again, I've given you these three things, but anybody can do well practicing law, even if you don't feel like you should go, if you wind up in the right environment. So if you wind up in an environment where, like I said earlier, people care about you, where you feel like the work is you're learning and you are doing work you think is important. And again, I wish I could take credit for this particular thing here, but it's something that's important. So I did want to bring up a couple things because this is actually a very good question. And the more I think about it, I said it wasn't a good question, or I implied it wasn't. But the more I think about it, it's actually an excellent question. It's a very good question. I think you said, why do people not do this and pursue it? I think that people a lot of times don't do it because they feel they need to start at the top. And the top's not open. So that's correct. So the top isn't open if you didn't do well in law school, if you don't have the correct personality yet. And again, all this is developed. You can develop all of this. And I think a lot of people think that they need to start at the top. And I just think that's complete nonsense. Everything is like a race, and people learn at different speeds. And feeling that you shouldn't practice law because of you're not starting at the top, I think is ridiculous. I think starting at the bottom, if anything, starting at the bottom is actually smarter, because what happens is a lot of people get psyched out of these big firms and stuff very early in their career, and then they drop out. And law firms love hiring people that are trying to move up. As a matter of fact, I tell this story probably every week, but a lot of people that start the practice of law and I place, and the ones that I place the most, there's always a story about how they're moving up, or this next firm is something that's fulfilling an ambition, and they're able to make that case. Either I make it for them, or they're able to make that. You don't need to start at the top. If anything, you're better off getting experience and trained. There's so many stories I know of attorneys that have, I don't know, failed the bar multiple times, not gotten a job, and gotten a job at a small firm, and then done really well and moved to a bigger firm. This is the most common story. It happens all the time. Or so you don't need to start at the top. And then the other thing is, I think a lot of people are psyched out psychologically by people saying, oh, it's a bad profession, it's really hard. Well, how can you know that if you haven't done it? That's insane. As long as you find an environment where people care about your learning and doing work you think is important, and if you really are good at something, what'll happen is you'll be able to move to a better firm later. Yeah. And so it's this, I would not get psyched out. I would start at smaller firms. The need to start at the top is all about ego. And so ego is a huge topic. And this topic is one of the most important topics I could possibly cover. And if anything, I'd love to do I probably wouldn't do it for attorneys, but I'd love to do a presentation just on nothing but the ego. But that so many people are governed by their ego, which is essentially like people feeling like caring about others think about them, being concerned about and this is how attorneys are with each other, that they need to look a certain way. They want to be concerned about what people are saying about them, and it's just how it is. And most people, by the way, are like this. So it's not, if you're like this, I'm not criticizing you, because it's very common. It's just and it's not like that as much anymore with younger people, but it's still that way. It's not as much as it used to be. I think people have different values these days, but at the same time, being concerned with what others think about you is just a recipe for unhappiness. The thing you need to do is you need to embrace whatever works for you and not care about what others think. I've told this story. I don't know if I've ever told this story, but I had this weird interview with a firm once, and it's a long story, but essentially the guy said to me, I talked about working in a law firm and how I wanted to do good and all this stuff. And he said, are you kidding me? And his point that he made, and what I said in response was, I've always been more concerned about what I'm doing than what other people are doing. And then the guy, he was an older guy, like probably in his late 60s. He tried to get me a job in firm's Detroit office. I was interviewing with a firm called Dickinson Wright in Washington, D.C. He's just a very nice man. And he said that never forget that lesson. The lesson is you can't be concerned about that. What you can't be, the more you're concerned about yourself, the more problems you're going to get into. And that goes for practicing law. I don't like to quote scripture and that sort of stuff in this, but even in most religions, whether it's Buddhism or in its highest form in Judaism, where they, and also in Christianity and the Bible, most of what they talk about is getting outside yourself is really the recipe to happiness and contentment. And Kabbalah is about, and Judaism is about doing good for others, and tzedakah. It's just, but the interesting thing about in the Bible is that when Jesus is asked one point, I don't know, I think it was in the book of John, I don't remember, but he's asked, what is the one lesson or whatever you take out? He says something like, you need to love God with all your heart and all your mind. And that whole idea of the same thing in Buddhism and Judaism and all these different religions is to take yourself outside of yourself is the only way to be happy. And it's easier said than done. But I think that a lot of times that people get themselves into trouble with this whole ego thing, and it doesn't lead anywhere. It's just, and they do that their whole lives. I think if some people here look at your people that they know that are unhappy, you may see that's one of their big problems is being concerned with others think instead of, okay, what are the, let me see. Oh, here's a fun question. Okay, let me see here. Okay, so this is also another big one. This person says, I am a 37-year-old corporate lawyer with 2 children, and I'm not satisfied with the hours or work culture. What alternate career paths can I pursue? So this is when the person says they have 2 children, what that means is that they have obligations now. And so what a lot of people do is their lifestyle rises to the level of their lifestyle goes to the level of their income. So if you make double the income, then you live twice. And so then if you have kids, and that means you have to support them, and then you're unsatisfied and you have no other options. They always say in law firms that they love it when you buy a house or when you have student loans and things, because it means they're more dedicated to them, and it's probably the truth. So if this person's unhappy, I think that the things that I suggested here are probably good. I think you can always potentially go in-house, you can do other things. Or the other big one is just reduce your expenses and try something completely different. But I would say if you're in a law firm, many times just finding a law firm that matches more your interests is probably a better idea as opposed to being in a firm where you're unhappy. I think a lot of what people are unhappy about is many times the people that they're working with. I also sense one of the things I think is very important is there's another thing that I think is control. So control means feeling like you have control over your future, and that's scary. So for me, that's one of the reasons I didn't like being in a law firm, was because I didn't feel like I had control over my future, meaning partnership, advancement. The firm I was in when I left was letting all these people go, and I was like, this is crazy. You want to have control over your future. And that's one of the things that appeals to some people about entrepreneurship or sales, meaning if you sell something, you have control. So you can control your future by picking up your game or whatever. And so a lot of times people don't feel like they have control. I would ask yourself, like, what if that may be the issue? Like, it's out of control because you have all these people to support. Another way that people feel like they get control of their future is they save a lot of money. So they save money, and then they know that if someone lets them go, they have to do something else to the economy that gives them control. Great question. Thank you. Okay. Apologies if I already answered this. Does your service provide any services to people interested in transitioning out of a law firm? No, unfortunately, I wish I did. I do like consulting, but that's not going to help you. It would, but I would be very careful about people like consultants and other people trying to counsel you on this stuff. I think, how would I do this if I was you? I would get a professional coach. The problem with all this stuff, there's all these people like all over the country that will consult and talk to you about this stuff. But really, I think you just need to find stuff that interests you and not jump at the first thing that does. So it's almost, if you want to meet a significant other, like, you can do it a lot of ways. You can jump at the first thing, that you meet, or person that you meet, or you can meet a lot of different people. And and get a sense of what clicks for you. I think that if you want to transition, I think it's something where you need to get out there and do all this stuff yourself, meaning you need to meet people and investigate different industries. And like I know an attorney, for example, that became an agent and he became a music agent. And so he just started joining all these musical organizations and that's how he did it. But I would be very careful about different career services and things to some extent. Not that they don't help, because there are a lot of very good consultants out there and things, but I would spend a lot of time myself investigating it. And then I would probably, rather than, I mean, I, for example, charge a lot of money for consulting, and I don't think I would not recommend spending a lot of money. I would do all the work yourself before you do that. And one of the things I'll tell you about that I think is pretty cool, and I'll just kind of, a lot of times just applying to a lot of different places, not as an attorney, but asking, saying, I have a law degree. Could you have time for an informational interview and stuff could actually work. And I know people that have gotten jobs that way. I used to do that for attorneys. So I had a service called, and it was essentially all it was. And this is a big secret. It's not a big secret, but it's a very effective way to get a job. Is if you were just to apply to 500 random companies and just say, hey, I'm an attorney, but interested in transitioning into other roles. They could be sales, they could be anything. Do you have anything that you think I might enjoy or be good at? Literally just applying randomly to companies, doing that. I've had people that I've done that with before to help. Again, I have a big heart, and I used to do this for free for attorneys. I did it and I started a business doing it, but the business never lost a lot of money. It was very hard. But the reason was because it was we were mailing the resumes out, but this works. So this is a good way to do it yourself, and people will call you with ideas, and you'll talk to people and meet people. I think that sending out 500 applications, even though it sounds insane, could actually work. I mean, it exposes you to a lot of different ideas. So that's something I would do. I would also, if I was you, I would also try to get involved in a lot of different organizations that match what you're doing. So say you're interested in, I don't know, restaurants, or then you can start going to restaurant conventions. You get these ideas on your own, and you don't need a career counselor to tell you what you should be doing. But I would definitely also take different career aptitude tests and things that would be helpful for you, and see where your expertise lies. Because again, there are tests that will tell you, like I told you, I took a test that you should be an FBI agent. It also said epidemiologist, or whatever that's worth. So if you do something like that, could be very helpful. Oh, here we go. Okay, so I hope that helps. Okay, so this person says, give me one second. The person before them said, it was funny, are you going to talk about the subject matter? Because I talked about a lot of stuff beforehand. Let me see here. Okay, so this person says, I find the biggest demand by rural is for litigators who can help everyday people or small business. However, I find the court deadlines, hearings, and trial preparation, civil litigation very stressful. Usually before a deadline or court date, my mind is always spinning, and I can hardly sleep. So it is stressful for all attorneys. I think what happens is over time, litigators get used to all this, and that's how that works. And then over time, what happens is senior litigators, you would have people working for you that are worrying about this stuff. So as a young attorney, your job is to get exposed to this stuff, and then to learn about the deadlines. And then you have other people that work for you later that you supervise doing it. But yeah, all litigation is pretty much like that, unless you do appellate litigation where there's not as many deadlines. So that's a very good question. But being a litigator is very stressful. The most stressful thing about being a litigator is that your boss is usually your boss, meaning if you have a boss inside of a law firm, and if you're working in a law firm, you have multiple bosses a lot of times. So you have those bosses, then the court's your boss, and then client's your boss, and then so just all these bosses. And so you can never make everyone happy because the client's losing. So it can be a very stressful job, and litigation is stressful. A lot of people, it's a lot to handle, and it can be a very difficult job, but also you can do very well financially. Okay, let's see here. I'll go to some of the later questions. Okay, someone asked for the slide deck. So I think this article is on law crossing, and then it was expanded to 100. So if somebody's interested in that, I would just say I think it's called top 60 careers you can do, but we expanded it to 100. And okay, so this is a good question. So I'm glad someone asked about the presentation. So let me see here. I would like to know where to start. A lot of possible career paths you've given seem interesting and worthwhile, but I have no clue what to do, to be frank. I graduated from law school 5 years ago and I've only been able to have work for one side around, but frankly, I just want to know where to start. Okay, so what you need to do is you need to get out and investigate things and meet people. The thing I love, and I always talk about every presentation, but when you read this book, Think and Grow Rich, he talks about, I think it's that book. He talks about libraries and how bookstores, and you need to go look at magazine shelves and Barnes and Noble, look at books and see what interests you. You need to figure out what interests you. So there's something you're going to gravitate towards. I don't know what that is. That's up to you. You're in charge. There's something you're going to gravitate towards. And I can't tell you what that is. For some people, it's helping the poor. For other people, it's helping the rich. For other people, it's working on cars. I don't know. But everyone has natural instincts and abilities. And those are products of your genetics. They're also products of your social, how you grew up socially. They're products of your parents. They're products of, what's interesting too about parents is your parents, everyone gets a lot of things from their parents. So you get interest in different subjects from your parents. If your parents are like engineers, they tend to talk a certain way and plus your biology makes you probably very well suited to be an engineer. If they're attorneys, a lot of times parents with attorneys, so your parents give you a lot of skills and things that you may not even realize, and then interest from where you grew up and things. So the only way to figure out what you're interested in is to spend time around other subjects besides what you're doing, and you need to throw yourself into it, and you need to read and surfing the internet during work, whatever you think is interesting to you and whatever appeals, because something will. I don't know what that is, but something will. And it's probably, if it's not practicing law, it could be another legal practice here. I don't know, but you have to figure out what you're interested in. Everybody's interested in something. And I don't know what that is for you, but everybody's interested. There's something you're interested in. It could be, it could be professional sports. It could be, it could be how to build, I don't know. So that's all I can say. And I've tried to make that a couple of different ways and say that as many ways as possible. But the only way to do that is really to expose yourself to a lot of ideas. So that means it could be going to seminars. I could be going to the bookstore and just looking at the magazine rack and looking at books and business and personal improvement and all these different things and seeing what interests you, because something will pop out, and then meeting lots of different people. So if you meet lots of different people, that's very useful, because those people will give you ideas. And that's really where most of the stuff, where these ideas come from, is meeting different people. So one person asked, do I have services and things? I do run what are called masterminds, which are just basically groups of people where we get together and talk about different ideas with other people confidentially. You could be in a mastermind group. I think that's on BCG under, BCG Surge / it's reverse recruiting. But you need groups of people that you talk about. And it doesn't have to be through me. It could be like, even if it was like a church or a religious group, or just, you need to get exposed to different people's ideas and get out of the rut you're in with only associating with people in your industry. And again, yeah, so I hope that helps. Okay. Here's a good question too about IP. Let's see. So, I like this idea about just this, and this person's not rambling. I was the one that rambled, but just looking at lots of different things. As a senior IP associate, I found myself at a crossroads. Working at my current firm has been a pleasant experience. The people are great, and the work is substantive and interesting. However, despite all this, I am simply lacking any motivation or drive to continue in this field. Even though getting paid well is nice, I cannot help but feel I'm missing out on something else. I consider going in-house, however, it seems more like the same, less interesting work. All this has led me to question my next steps should be, as I do not want to face the same dilemma in another profession. Any advice would be appreciated. Same thing. That's a great question. So the same thing as before. So if this work, it sounds like you're at a nice firm, you like the people, but you're just not happy with what you're doing. And that's perfectly fine. You may be an entrepreneur at heart. You may have other skills. Now, most professions are, I don't know and this is another word of wisdom my dad gave me. It was like, you do 80% of the work you don't like because of the 20% you do, or something. I think my dad said it to me at one point, which is good advice. But the point is that even though you don't necessarily like what you're doing, You have to think about your future. And again, but if you're not happy doing this, maybe if you're a senior IP lead, maybe you're better off being an inventor. Maybe you're better off in one of these other professions. But yeah, you can't, you're never going to, and this is, I'm going to put this in big block letters, but you're never going to reach greatness. You're never going to be happy. To be happy and reach your full potential doing something you don't love. That's crazy, right? So why would you do something you don't love? You need to just be really freaking clear about that. Like, why would you do something you don't love? Like, you only should do things that you love. So if you don't love what you're doing, this 80% drudgery and for the 20% you enjoy is fine, but what's the point of going through life not liking what you do? If you have to support a family and stuff, your family is going to be happier if you're happier, regardless of these other things you may think are important, which in terms of the prestige of your job and stuff. I can't emphasize this point enough, that you're never going to be happy and reach your full potential unless you're doing something you love. Because do you think people think about it? If you were a client, would you want to hire an attorney that was just lackadaisical and neither here nor there about their commitment? Who would you want to hire? If you had a serious disease, would you want to go to a doctor that was just going through the motions, or would you want to go to a person that was the expert and freaking all out and enthusiastic? No, you shouldn't. There's nothing wrong with not liking your job, but think about what you would want. What would you want if you need an IP litigator? Would you want someone that was just going through the motions, or do you want someone that eat, breathe? And there was when John Quinn, who's obviously a very successful attorney, the founder of Quinn Emanuel, was growing his firm. He was a partner that I knew that used to go with him on pitches and was very close with him. And John Quinn would go into these meetings and he'd be like, "If you hire me, I'm going to eat, breathe, and sleep this mat." And he was serious. Like he's not even messing around. He's like, "If you hire me, I will eat, breathe, and sleep your case until it's done. I'm a freaking animal. I'm all over this." People are like, "Sign me up." And who would you want to hire? Would you want to hire some attorney I went to this great law school and we're got a very good partnership here? No, hell no. So he was just a scrappy attorney that's just beating up everyone in terms of getting business. And this is what you need to be. So you're never going to reach your potential unless you're an animal and you really love what you're doing. Otherwise, you're just wasting your time. And think about that. Yeah. And I don't know what else to say, but this is what I recommend. And again, your interest, your skill could be something as dumb as a violin string. Not dumb, but you could be interested in how to make a better violin string. I don't care. Or selling violin strings. People do this kind of stuff all the time. But you have to be interested in something. And this is something I talked to my daughter about, because it was interesting. Like, I remember when I was applying to colleges, I've maybe told this story before, but there was this guy that was in the year before me or something, and got into, I don't remember what it was, Yale or Harvard. It doesn't matter what school it was. Some school I was interested in, and I was talking to my advisor, and my advisor said what's interesting about him is they had a lot of people to choose from that were smarter than him, but he was just very interested in bugs. All he did was study bugs, and he had this huge bug collection. He talked about bugs. He loved bugs, and there's very few people like that. Like, most people are just me too. They're like, "Oh, I have good grades. I've got to get at scores. I've got this. Aren't I special? I'm working at a big firm." But there's very few people that are very passionate about something. And so what's the drawback of you being passionate about your practice area or your just some subject matter or some business? You have to be passionate about it. Do you think I'm obviously very passionate about what I do? Is there a benefit to being passionate? Yes, because then you're doing something that gives you strength and that you love, as opposed to not. You have to be passionate, and it doesn't matter what it is. You literally could be passionate about something as dumb as mosquito repellent. I'm just making things up. And I know a guy that was passionate about suntan lotion, and he was in Vancouver and started this giant, there's no sun in Vancouver. It's the sunniest area of Canada, but come on. And I think he might have even been an attorney and started this business and was very successful. So yeah, you need to be passionate about something. Okay, so and that's what schools are interested in. That's what the world's interested in. That's what so you can't succeed not being passionate in something. Okay, so what is interested in transition from the law and late stage of the career to a different experience prior to eventual retirement, where are the best places to go for guidance on where the opportunities are, how to best position oneself, and apply to them. So it doesn't matter. You say late in your career could be you're in your 60s. That's not late. People worked until their 90s now. So they said that people are born now are likely to live to be 100 or over 100 or something. Where do you go? You go to what interests you. You have to, it's the same question as the person before does. You have to find out what that is. And the only way you can do that is by exposing yourself to a lot of different ideas, which means meeting lots of different people and getting out and doing whatever the heck you can to do that wherever you possibly can, whether it's networking, I don't care, or going to the bookstore, and you just have to learn about as many ideas as you possibly can. And you can use it to transition. This person says, okay, I missed the deadline for the New York bar exam. Let me see. Missed the deadline for the NYLE, which will delay my bar admission in New York this year. Will I be in trouble applying for jobs in New York before I can get that sorted out? Yes. So yeah, I'm assuming, yes. So yes, you need to be admitted to the bar to apply for jobs, or you can certainly explain that. So let me just explain something to you with law firms. So everyone's asked these jobs about getting a job in a law firm. So law firms have choices. So who would you choose? Would you choose someone admitted to the bar or someone not? Come on. Someone admitted to the bar, someone not. So unless you have bar, someone not. Come on, what would you choose if you were a law firm? Or someone from New York, or someone not? So anytime, so that's why it's better to move to an area if you want to, someone not. So, or someone from a top law school, someone not, someone with experience in the practice area, someone not. So these are I can give you millions of different choices. If you're not admitted to the bar, yes, you can still get a job, but it's not going to be as good of a job because the law firm's always going to choose the best person it can. So just the way it works. Let me give you also one piece of advice. This is for everyone on the call. The smartest thing to do with jobs, by the way, there's two things that are really smart. The first is to apply to firms that don't have freaking openings, because then you're the only person that's applying. And if the law firm has a need, who cares? So this is, I'm not going to get into it, but this is it's the most logical thing, but everyone applies to, but again, firms that have openings, that means that they've identified a need, and it's also a good place to apply, obviously. But then you need to be the first to apply. Because think about your email. If you go into your email and you look at your spam, you've got thousands of emails, right? And this is how it is with applications. So the first day the ad comes out, like the law firm is getting 10 or 15 or 20 or whatever the number is, job ads, and they're hungry, they need to hire someone. So they're looking at the first couple ones and hoping that they're good. The first one that comes in is most likely to get interviewed, the second, and then they do that. And then, so the first day they'll pick a couple people to interview. And then the second day they'll maybe be like, okay, we've got a couple people to interview, I'm not going to worry about it. But then the next 30 to 60 days, the job might still be open and all these applications are pouring in, and they don't give a crap anymore. They've already, now if you really, and who wants to open 150 emails and click on them? This is how they think. And you would too. So you have to apply first to jobs. That's a huge advantage. And that's something like when I send jobs to people, like I send a job the second it comes in, like we get it from the firm, and I'm like, boom, you got to apply. And then all these people sit around, they're like, I've read these reviews, so said it's a little top heavy. Great, then you're going to not get a job. You have to apply to jobs immediately when they come out. And if you don't, you're out of your mind, because you're not going to, anyway, the law firms hire the first people that apply. Now, that's not to say that they don't want to hire the best person and everything, but just put yourself in the shoes of a HR director, which is a lot of work, and they work very hard. But if they have someone saying, I've got this huge case and I'm losing all this money, and I'm afraid I'm going to lose a client if I don't hire someone right away, and they're going to try to bring in the people, or they're losing money when they don't have hired people. So you just need to work on it. So this person says, how do I find out about legal careers in other countries? So with remote work, you can work from anywhere. If you're admitted to the bar, you can there's plenty of work for U.S. attorneys in other countries. I'm getting ready to start a company in the next year, not for a while, that will help attorneys do this because it's not too difficult. But you can this is not an alternative career. How do you find? So all the ones I talked about, writing or most of these careers, you can do remotely. You can do recruiting remotely in another country. One of our recruiters is in Portugal. So you can work lots of places remotely. So it's not something to worry about, and alternative careers as well. So that's one of the benefits of all of this remote stuff. It's just awesome. Like you can do a lot of stuff remotely. Okay, let me see here. These are all great questions. Thank you, everyone who's answering these questions today. This is very smart to try to get this information, and I appreciate all these questions. Worked in insurance defense 24 years, taken early retirement to attend law school. Insurance defense, some person's already an attorney. Okay. I graduated right before the COVID pandemic with the economic shutdown. I could not immediately obtain work or afford to take the bar exam. Okay, that makes sense. In addition, I've experienced age discrimination. That makes sense. And I've been discouraged at every firm from returning to insurance. In the interim, I obtained 2 masters in ADR and HR. How can I best move forward? Okay, if you're discouraged, that should be a sign that you're discouraged, that maybe the things aren't opening up. But in most cases, there's a lot going on here. So the first thing is, if you've already retired, you've retired. And so now you want to come back after retiring, which I guess it would make sense. I understand. But of course, it's discouraging because you've retired and you retired for a reason. And then you have 2 masters in ADR and HR. So what I would recommend doing, I think it's very difficult to start as an attorney after you've retired. Now you certainly can. So I'm going to tell you how to do it. And I know people that have done it, and very successfully, by the way. But what I would recommend doing is, the first thing is, how do you get a job? So the first thing, in order to get a job, there's plenty of jobs out there and plenty of people that will hire you. What you need to do is you need to find someone that will train you, and someone that can afford to invest in you and training you. And that's probably going to be a smaller firm. It could be a solo or a smaller firm that will hire you and won't pay you as much as you want to make, but they'll teach you how to be an attorney, and you can do that. So the first thing is, we're trying to work at a small law firm because you need the training. The other thing you can do is you can open your own law firm. You're going to need to take the bar, and so no one's going to hire you without the bar. You need to at least take the bar, and of course you've experienced age discrimination, but you're not experiencing age discrimination. You're experiencing no bar exam discrimination. That's the biggest one. Anybody that has a law degree, by the way, can get hired by an attorney, like a solo or a small firm somewhere that needs help. It may not pay what you want, but you're going to be able to get experience. And then these 2 master's degrees in ADR and HR, that's great. Then you need to go and maybe try to work in, I would probably recommend HR or something along those lines, and maybe you can work in HR. I think you have plenty of jobs. You don't need to take the bar, by the way, but this is a lot of education. This is a bar exam and then 2 master's degrees. And even if and then I'll just tell you another thing, even if you've gone to Duke Law School and then gotten 2 ADR and HR from University of North Carolina, I don't know, I'm just saying, example, and I don't even know what schools you've gone to, but you would have a very hard time getting a job because you start looking like an academic. And in law firms, it's more practical. Like a lot of times education doesn't go over as well with law firms. It's more practical. It's not what you would think. It's like more education is better. It sounds to me like you like school and but you need to take the bar exam if that's what you want to do. If not, I would recommend going into HR. And there's always tons of companies that will hire you. But again, there is age discrimination in the legal profession. The problem with starting so late is, and I'll just actually do this for the benefit of everyone that's taking the time to listen today, because I know this is a lot to cover, but can you do the job? So when any law firm that's hiring you, I've covered this before, but these are Harrison's rules about getting hired. So law firms are asking, can you do the job? Will you do the job? Can you be managed? Will you do the job long term? Do you want the job? And then, do we like you? Okay. So, come on. So just, and when I say come on, I'm just this. So if you're a law firm looking at you, can you do the job? No, you haven't passed the bar. You haven't taken the bar exam. So no, it's not age discrimination. They have no idea if you can do the job because you haven't even taken the bar. Okay. So next one is, can you be managed? Probably not, because you've been for 25 years. And you're already retired and you're older. And are you really going to want to work like a bright-eyed and bushy-tailed 23-year-old or 25-year-old kid that needs to learn and has his whole future or her whole future? Probably not. So you're probably going to be very difficult to manage, especially with all these degrees, because it looks like you're going to tell them, you're going to school them in HR, and no, they're not going to think that. Will you do the job long term? No, you're already retired. Come on. Like, think about this. If you're an employer, would you think you would do the job long term? You're just trying it out. Okay. And then, do you want the job? You might, but they don't care. Can they do better with someone that's passed the bar, that can be managed, that's probably going to stick around? And then, do we like you? If you want to work in a law firm, you need to look like them. And they're not going to necessarily like somebody that's got all these degrees. I'm just telling you how they think. This is not age discrimination. This is discriminating against academics. It's discriminating against people that are not taking the bar and not others. So it's not anything personal against you. But it's just how they think. And they'll ask this for anybody that they're hiring. They'll ask these 5 questions, and there's probably more, but these 5 is just one of the ways to think about it. I'm not trying to be rude, or these are amazing accomplishments. It's just how the law firms think, and I can't. That's what they think. Okay, failed the bar my first attempt, big deal. Passed a year later, great. After passing, I was forced into a job as a debt collection agent. That sounds fun, because I was running out of money, needed to keep a roof, of course. I finally transitioned into an attorney position, again in consumer debt collection. That's fine. I feel stuck in this industry and I enjoy this work. In this role, I do not deal with a billable hour. Okay. And feel like after 3 years as an attorney, I've gained very little meaningful experience. Okay. This is a good point. Meaningful experience. I worry that I've developed habits that result in my failure in a traditional firm. Okay, that's probably true. This might I'm considering abandoning the law. No, that's dumb. Okay, abandoning the law. Today you discussed how the right environment might be the fix. What would you suggest given the situation? Okay, so I like your point that you made, bad habits. So that's a very good point. So one of the reasons people go to work in larger firms who don't start out as solo practitioners and stuff is because you do learn much better habits when you work in larger law firms in terms of the work. So it's very perceptive of you to see that. And just because you're seeing that means you're probably trainable. So how do you get out of this? You just go to work you start working in a smaller firm doing something else in another practice area, and you convince someone to hire you. That's all. It doesn't mean you have to abandon the law. There's nothing wrong with passing the bar or failing on your first or second or third or whatever attempt it was. You said second attempt. But no one cares. It's, again, like lots of people fail the bar, especially in California. They fail it all over. So doesn't matter. Bar's exam, passing that it's not an intelligence test, it's a study test. So you just didn't study enough or learn the habits. But no, you can get out of debt collection and do something else. You could even start your own practice. There's all sorts of things you could do. You could start your own personal injury firm. You go to work in personal injury. These are all skills you can do. So no, there's no reason to frickin' quit because you don't like what you're doing. That's just absolutely nuts. So I don't think in 3 years is nothing. So let's just talk about this. So you went to law school, and let's say you graduate from law school, the average person may be 25. So then you've been working, so now you're 28. People retire from the practice of law at about 85 to 90 maybe now. So you have more than almost two lifetimes. So if you were to take 2 lifetimes, you're 28. So plus 56 equals 2 lifetimes would be 84. So no, you don't quit the practice of law because 3 out of years of wow, it's not even retirement. Come on, this question is nuts. So no one should quit the practice of law because you had a bad start. Come on. Sorry to get a little emotional here. It's just dumb. People ask the same question over and over again. I'm not saying you're being dumb. And you're not dumb. You're asking, you answer the question. But again, I would not worry about any of this. You have plenty of time. Everyone does. This person has time. It's retired. I told them they could get a job in a small law firm, but then you take the bar. Oh, same thing. Sorry. Give me 1 second. Sorry. Okay, this is another good question. This is about salary expectations. Or actually, how do you adjust salary to career changes? Should I have expected to be a starter in a new industry? Okay, so salary expectations does not concern you. So your salary expectations, no one cares but you. No one cares but you. So no one's going to pay you more money because you've got more experience. That's just they're going to pay businesses pay businesses pay as little as they can. The businesses, okay, pay as little as they can or as much as they can get. So if a business is hiring you and to do something and they can hire someone more cheaply, they don't care that you're an attorney. If anything, that's a drawback. So again, businesses that are well run, they're businesses. Their objective is to keep the costs low as possible to make as much profit as possible. That's how they operate. Now, they also value things like longevity and they value hiring the best people for the roles, but your salary expectations do not concern them. You could come to them and say, I had one time I was interviewing an HR director, and I'm talking about like 20 years ago, and back then the salaries were like, I don't know, 80 to 90. And I had one guy interview and he wanted like 200. And I was like, are you out of your mind? And he's, that's what I expect and I'm worth it. I'm like, but you don't even have, what are you making now? And he's, I'm making 110, but I'm worth it. And sometimes you can have these expectations and it's good to believe in yourself, but no one cares about your expectations. They'll hire the best person. Now, if you're really good and they really feel like you're worth it and you can convince them to hire you then they will. The problem with your salary expectations though, and I just want to make sure you understand, this is a really important point. So I've had instances before where people have been making, say, someone's making $60,000 a year and they come to me and they say, I really think I should be making 120 or whatever, or 100, and then you give them a raise. That's a lot of money, especially if other people in the market are charging 60. It's just, you have to put yourself in the shoes of the employer, and then the employer is going to be a little resentful if they're paying all this extra money and they don't have to because they know what the market is. So your salary expectation, you have to be very careful when you bring those to the equation, especially because anytime you ask for more money but you just have to be very careful with that. Now, that's not to say there's anything wrong with having salary expectations. You want to be paid what you should be paid, but you have to be very careful about that's like saying, a lot of people will do this all the time. So people like a lot of people in New York, you might be making like $300,000 a year in New York as a mid-level associate or whatever. And then you want to move to Midwest or Rochester or Albany or something. And they're like, yeah, we'll pay you 150. And you're like, what the heck? No, this is what I make in New York. No one cares about what you're making in New York. They care about what they can pay for people in the market that they're in. And so you can't bring these expectations of what an employer should do their expectations are what they are. It's what the market is. And I don't know how markets work, but what is a good way to remember? A mature student, graduate from law school. While working, I have a background in sales and with the deputy sheriff. That's cool. That's awesome. I think that would be more fun to stay deputy sheriff. I love organizing, mentor, and as a mentor to everyone else in the office environment. Do you have multiple? No, so we don't place HR people, but I would just apply to say you want to work in HR. I think that's great. HR, by the way, is an awesome job. I can't say enough good things about it. And it help a lot of people. And most people that get into HR love it. And I've known lots of people that do it and really like it. The best way to do it is just apply for these HR jobs. Again, bringing your salary expectations as what you think you should be earning as an attorney to an HR job. No one cares that you went to law school in terms of what they're going to pay you. So you're not going to make as much. But if you want to do it, you can definitely get into HR. Okay, a lot of good questions. Okay, let's see here. Well, thank you for all these questions too, by the way. Wow, there's a lot of questions today. Okay. Oh, I've been practicing so I cut off the I there, it looks like. I've been practicing attorney for 15 years and I want to leave the legal field, and I found that people tend to be intimidated by my job titles and experience even after I've dumbed down my resume, highlight my transferable skills, and clearly state in my cover letter that I want to start over in your field. What is the best way to convince hiring managers that I want to switch careers? Does the size of the city or geographic? Yeah. Okay, so this is the same lesson that we talked about here. So people, you're right, people read their titles and stuff. You don't necessarily need to put all that down. What people, when they hire you, they want to feel like whatever jobs you're applying to, if you're trying to do things, they probably feel like you can do the job. Your problems are this. They're going to be, can you be managed? Be one of the problems. And then the other problem is going to be, let me just put this here, yellow, is going to be, do we like you? And will you do the job long term? So here's what happens. People that take jobs in professions and things that are beneath them, not beneath them, but that wouldn't require the type of education or the skills that they have, often resent the employer because they're not paying them as much, or there's not as much prestige, and then they become more difficult to manage when they're hired. So employers want to feel very good about themselves and like they have a lot of power. So I'll tell you an interesting story. So like when people hire people to work for them, I don't even know how to say this, but I want to be really careful here because I don't want to offend anybody. But an example is if I hire people, like I've had jobs around my house before for people to do just various tasks and things. It could be painting, or I'm thinking of one example would be like taking care of a fish tank. Okay. So I had one guy show up to take care of my fish tank, and he was like, "Hey, I'm your neighbor. I live 4 doors down in this," and it was the worst mistake I ever made because this guy was resentful. He was working for me, and so people want to hire people and he destroyed inside of my fish tank by not knowing how to get the algae, use a razor blade. It's just a whole. But people want to hire people that they feel like they have control over, and that are a little bit afraid of them. And when I say afraid, I don't mean afraid like in a negative sense, but that respect them. So if you're trying to get into jobs, like if you want to go to work in a fast food restaurant, they would be very dumb to hire you because they're going to think this guy's from white. You understand what I'm saying? So the management issues is a real problem. And you have to ask yourself, what about them makes you think you can be managed? So the only way to make them think you can be managed is for you to act like you really, and if you mean it, like you really respect them, that you want to learn, that you always wanted to do this kind of work, that you've been an attorney, but it's not a good long-term career, convincing them of why they're in a better position than you, and making the person like you. And that's not easy to do. The other is do the job long-term. Most people that take jobs like you're talking about do not stick with it. They try it and then like, you know what, the money's not as good, and they're resentful. And then the other one is, do we like you? People do not like people that think they're better than them. Would it be good if I had a need for someone to watch, and I don't have any babies, but say I had a baby to watch my baby, would it make sense for me to hire the CEO of a big corporation to come in and take care of my baby? Would I think that he would be able to be managed? He would probably tell me what to do. Would I think he would stick around? No, I don't. Would I think he'd want the job? He might be able to convince me he does, but would I like him? No, I wouldn't like him either. I would be like, why is this CEO of General Electric worth taking care of my baby? So this is how people think. And so you have to put yourself in the shoes of the employer. Okay, let me see here. Okay, good. These are a lot of questions. Okay, let me see here. I'm almost done, most of them. So let me see here. So if anybody has any other ones, and I apologize for this person, it was so late. Firm. Okay, I'm a corporate associate and an M&A associate in a mid-sized firm. Definitely want to move on from the mid-sized firm. No interest to go to a larger firm, but would like to go in-house. I only do transactional work now, but I have some litigation experience. I'm active in bar associations, published very regularly. What else can make myself attractive to in-house positions? So the most important thing to make yourself attractive to in-house positions would be to continue doing what you're doing as a corporate M&A associate, and that would probably be what I would recommend. If you go to a larger firm, you would be even more attractive. So the way that companies think is they typically want to have people that are from the bigger firms because that looks more prestigious to their board and other people. The bigger firm you're at, many times the better. The other way to make yourself more attractive would become a partner in your firm. So partners are actually also much more attractive for in-house companies. So if you become a partner, then a lot of general counsels of big companies have been partners in firms as well. So that could help you as well. Okay, let me see. I think I've gotten most of the questions. Okay, let me see. Okay. I think that's it. So I certainly appreciate everyone being on this call today. I know that was a lot of information, and thank you. And I look forward to talking to everyone next week. Let me just make sure I got all the questions. Okay, this person said, yeah, I think I got everything. Thanks again, everyone, for being on the webinar. And I hope this information was helpful. I will say, just as a compliment to everyone, because this was a lot of information. Learning about this stuff is very smart. And I think it puts everyone on this webinar way ahead of the game, just learning the stuff. The thing that's nice about this is what you're learning is this stuff took me over 25 years of looking at resumes and working with attorneys every day to learn. And you're getting like a huge education when you do this. And I definitely have a lot of respect for people that take their careers seriously. I can tell you that not every week, but at least every couple of weeks, I get emails from people that have done things like been on my webinars or listened to me and stuff in the past and have really gone on to do really great things, and not just the practice of law, but other things as well. And again, it's just because I'm sharing what I know. I think it helps. It's not that there's anything special about it, but learning this stuff is very useful. And I hope tonight or today was helpful for everyone, and definitely appreciate you being here. Thanks. Bye.